Chapter 2100. Mad Dragon Emperor recognized Chu Fengmian when he saw the appearance of primogenitor Tianlong in the sky. It wasn't the first time he had seen Chu Fengmian in this form, so he recognized Chu Fengmian immediately. Is this the sect master? Sword Slayer King, Luo He, and the others were stunned as this was the first time they had seen Chu Fengmian transform into primogenitor Tianlong, especially Luo He. She couldn't believe that Chu Fengmian could transform into the primogenitor Tianlong. This was something that the countless experts of the ancient War Dragon clan had never been able to do. Everyone calmed down when they saw that the primogenitor Tianlong in the sky was Chu Fengmian. They weren't panicking anymore, but they were still in a daze. Chu Fengmian came to the edge of the origin sword boundary, but he didn't step into it. Instead, he flew above the origin sword boundary and stood on top of it. What is the sect master planning to do? The Mad Dragon Emperor said with some surprise. When he saw the 100-meter-sized space in Chu Fengmian's palm, his eyes were filled with shock. He was completely stunned. Others might not be able to see it, but he could see that the space in Chu Fengmian's palm was a world of its own. There were many layers of space within it, and if it was released, it would be even bigger than the origin sword boundary. Chu Fengmian had actually taken out a miniature world. How could Mad Dragon Emperor not be shocked when he saw Chu Fengmian holding a miniature world in his hand like a toy? Everyone, enter the Cloud Feather Palace immediately, Chu Fengmian suddenly said when he arrived above the origin sword boundary. His voice reverberated throughout the origin sword boundary, waking up countless disciples who were in seclusion. Upon hearing the voice, all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect flew toward the Cloud Feather Palace without hesitation. Although Chu Fengmian didn't explain anything, all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect believed in him unconditionally and listened to him. Sword Slayer King, Green Dream, and the others also entered the Cloud Feather Palace. The seal that Chu Fengmian left on the Cloud Feather Palace was activated instantly, enveloping the entire Cloud Feather Palace. Mad Dragon Emperor turned into a ray of light and left the origin sword boundary. He came to the void and looked at Chu Fengmian from afar. We can begin now. Chu Fengmian nodded as he watched all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect enter the Cloud Feather Palace. Suddenly, he sent the small world in his hand into the origin sword realm. The moment this small world was pushed into the origin sword world, it started to swell. In fact, it even wanted to devour the origin sword world. If two small worlds were to get close to each other, they would devour each other's spatial energy and eventually fuse into one. However, Chu Fengmian made the first move before the small world could start devouring. The two spiritual swords in his hands were unsheathed at the same time. In an instant, two sword lights that were tens of thousands of feet long directly struck the small world. Rumble! The moment the 200,000 feet long sword lights entered the small world was shattered into pieces. Space was shattered into pieces. Sword Dao Origin! At the same time, a shocking sword light erupted from Chu Fengmian's back. This shocking sword light fused into the origin sword world, causing a huge vortex to appear in the depths of the origin sword world. It was a black hole. This black hole continued to devour the fragmented space. Chu Fengmian held the two swords in his hands and shattered the small world again and again. The spatial energy contained in the countless fragmented space was crazily devoured by the origin sword world. Chu Fengmian completely shattered this small world, and then allowed the origin sword world to devour it, allowing the origin sword world to evolve. This small world was much larger than the origin sword world. Now, it was fused with the blood essence of tens of thousands of disciples of the 5 great sections. Tens of thousands of disciples of the 5 great sects were equivalent to tens of thousands of cultivators and monster gods above the Emperor realm. Even Emperor Gu, a half-step Heaven Realm Master, had a lot of blood essence. Now, the blood essence of the disciples of the 5 great sects and the small world were being devoured by the origin sword world. Such a huge force caused the surrounding void to tremble. The Origin Sword world was expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. Is he trying to fuse this small world into the Origin Sword world to evolve it? Looking at this scene from the side, the Mad Dragon Emperor was extremely shocked in his heart. This was a method that was way beyond his imagination. A holy land could only grow up gradually after going through generations of grooming by the sect. But now, Chu Fengmian's method was incomparably brutal. He directly fused this small world and the blood essence of tens of thousands of disciples of the 5 great sects into the Origin Sword world to evolve it. However, this move was equivalent to using the accumulated resources of the 5 great sects to upgrade the Origin Sword world. The 5 great sects had already decided to establish themselves in the 9 regions, so they had also brought their elite disciples and countless resources to the Origin Sword world. Now, all these resources belonged to the Origin Sword world and were being devoured by it. In a few breaths' time, the Origin Sword world had already doubled in size. However, compared to the growth of the Origin Sword world, the growth of its power was even more terrifying. Within the Origin Sword world, every mountain and river was undergoing an earth-shattering transformation. Every mountain peak towered into the clouds. The soil on these mountains had a 5-colored glass-like appearance that contained incomparably pure spiritual energy. 5-colored living soil. Mad Dragon Emperor was shocked when he saw the transformation of the soil. This 5-colored glass-like soil was the living soil, a type of soil that could only be found in the sacred region. The quality of the spiritual herbs and sacred herbs that grew on this living soil could compare to 100. If it grew for 100 years, it would be equivalent to ordinary soil growing for 10,000 years. The living soil was divided into 3, 5, 7, and 9 colors. Now that Chu Fengmian had fused this small world into the Origin Sword world, the spiritual energy contained in the blood essence of the disciples of the 5 great sects had caused the soil of the Origin Sword world to evolve. It could be said that if the soil of the Origin Sword world was completely transformed into living soil, there would be an endless supply of sacred herbs growing in the Origin Sword world in the future. This would be enough to make the Origin Sword world self-sufficient. It wasn't just the soil. Now, every drop of water in the rivers of the Origin Sword world contained incomparably pure spiritual energy. The clouds in the sky and every inch of the mountains and rivers contained incomparably pure spiritual energy. First, he would set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Chapter 2101. Beneath the ground of the Origin Sword world, an incomparably huge spirit spring was forming. This spirit spring was hundreds of times larger than the one in the Sword Origin world. In order to start a new business in the 9 domains, the 5 great sects had brought the spirit springs to the 9 domains. There were more than a dozen spirit springs in that small world alone. Every single one of these spirit springs was much larger than the original spirit spring in the Origin Sword world. Now that Chu Fengmian had fused this pocket dimension into the Origin Sword world with his supreme technique, the dozen or so spirit springs within it were also fused into the Origin Sword world. Beneath the Origin Sword world, the dozen or so spirit springs gathered and formed a massive spirit spring. An endless stream of spirit energy was released from this spirit spring, causing the spirit energy within the Sword Origin world to become dozens of times richer. Now one could casually grab a ball of spirit energy and condense it into a spirit stone in the palm of one's hand. Martialists and Fey Celestials who cultivated in the Sword Origin world were hundreds of times faster than in the 9 domains. If the Sword Origin world had been a newly transformed sacred land before, then the Sword Origin world now was comparable to some of the older sects and even the sacred lands of the 7 great sections. The commotion caused by the Sword Origin world's upgrade was so great that it was very likely to attract the attention of many people. Experts were as common as clouds in the 9 regions. Celestial realm experts and even profound heaven realm experts might exist. Such a holy land would definitely cause countless experts to fight over it. However, Chu Fengmian was already prepared. He had already activated the life seal and completely enveloped the Sword Origin world and the surrounding void. The commotion caused by the Sword Origin world's upgrade couldn't be detected by the outside world at all. It was completely sealed. No matter how great the commotion was, it wouldn't be able to break through the seal of the life seal. Alright, the Sword Origin world is about to be completely upgraded. Chu Fengmian stood in the sky above the Origin Sword world, watching the transformation of the Origin Sword world below. The miniature world had been completely shattered, turning into fragments of space that were devoured by the Origin Sword world. The current size of the Sword Origin world was 3 times larger than before. Furthermore, every river and mountain within it had undergone a transformation. Even a random rock was filled with spiritual energy. If taken out, many cultivators would fight over it. There were treasures everywhere. Only now could the Sword Origin world be considered a true sacred ground. Cultivating inside, there was an endless supply of spiritual energy. All the warriors and Fey immortals would be able to raise their cultivation realms dozens or even hundreds of times faster than outside. Furthermore, it wasn't just the spiritual energy that had changed. The entire space of the Origin Sword world had become incomparably solid. Chu Fengmian hadn't gone all out to expand the Origin Sword world this time. Otherwise, the Origin Sword world would have expanded dozens of times in size after devouring the essence blood of over 10,000 disciples of the 5 great sections. However, the Origin Sword world had only expanded by 3 times. Even if Chu Fengmian had other plans, the space of the Origin Sword world was being refined over and over again, becoming incomparably solid. At the same time, the origin energy of the Origin Sword world had also increased by hundreds of times. In the past, any Sky Human Realm expert could enter and leave the Origin Sword world as they pleased. This was a hidden danger for the Sword Dao sect. Although Chu Fengmian was powerful, he couldn't be stationed in the Origin Sword world all the time. Therefore, he was mainly upgrading the Origin Sword world this time by using the power of the Origin Sword world itself. The origin source energy of the Sword Origin world had been upgraded. At a glance, one could see a 7-colored cloud shrouding the sky above the Sword Origin world. This 7-colored cloud was the origin source energy of the Sword Origin world. The origin energy of the origin energy of the Origin Sword world was already sufficient to manifest. This 7-colored cloud shrouded the sky above the Origin Sword world and constantly protected it. If any external enemies tried to invade, the Origin Sword world would be able to unleash its power and destroy them. The might of the origin energy of the origin energy of the Origin Sword world was dozens or even hundreds of times stronger than the heavenly star river that had protected the sacred dragon mystic realm. If 1 or 2 sky immortals and demon immortals dared to barge into the Origin Sword world, only death would await them. They would be mercilessly killed by the origin energy of the Origin Sword world. Even if several Sky Human Realm experts joined forces, it would be impossible for them to break through the defenses of the Origin Sword world in a short period of time. In terms of might, the origin energy of the Origin Sword world was comparable to an immortal artifact. It was an immortal artifact that could protect the Origin Sword world at all times. If I barge into the Origin Sword world by force, I won't be able to escape unscathed. The Mad Dragon Emperor also walked over and looked at the upgraded Origin Sword world. When he saw the origin energy above the Origin Sword world, he couldn't help but feel shocked. A sacred land like this was no longer something that ordinary Sky Human Realm experts would dare to encroach upon. The Mad Dragon Emperor was originally an invincible genius of his generation. Due to the hidden injuries of the heaven-defying tribulation, he was stuck at the half-step Sky Human Realm. Later on, Chu Fengmian healed his injuries. After the Mad Dragon Emperor stepped into the sky-human realm, his strength increased by leaps and bounds. His accumulation of tens of thousands of years was now fully unleashed. The Mad Dragon Emperor before him had already reached the pinnacle of the sky immortal realm. He could step into the immortal warrior realm at any time. This speed was extremely shocking. However, Chu Fengmian knew that with the Mad Dragon Emperor's talent, if he had chosen to break through the heaven-defying tribulation instead of the heaven-defying tribulation back then, the Mad Dragon Emperor's strength would be far beyond the sky immortal warrior realm. Given the Mad Dragon Emperor's talent, he could have stepped into the immortal general realm within 10,000 years. In fact, it was even possible for him to step into the mystic heaven realm. Now that he had entered the sky-human realm after 10,000 years of slumber, the Mad Dragon Emperor's strength increased by leaps and bounds. Right now, he wasn't any weaker than ordinary immortal warrior realm demon immortals. However, even with his current strength, his eyes were filled with dread when he looked at the origin energy above the origin sword world. If he was in the origin sword world and was killed by the origin energy, he wouldn't be able to escape unscathed. If those sky immortal warrior realm demon immortals dared to attack the origin sword world, they would be courting death. Right now, the defense of the origin sword world was no weaker than the defense of some of the overlord sects in the Grade 2 stellar domains. At the very least, it wasn't inferior to the defense of the sea sacrificial sect. Chapter 2102. If there were still people who had designs on the origin sword world, the origin energy alone would be enough to force them to retreat. Let's go back. Chu Fengmian fell silent as he watched the transformation of the origin sword world. Then, he took a step forward and stepped into the transformed origin sword world. Within the origin sword world, a large area of land had been transformed into 5 colors growing soil, giving off a sweet fragrance. The plants that were originally growing on the land now contained spiritual energy and were transforming into elixirs. Everything that grew on the 5 colors growing soil, even the most ordinary plants, would become elixirs. The sky was blue, and the rainbow clouds formed by the origin energy of the origin energy of the origin energy of the origin energy of the origin energy were no longer visible. The rainbow clouds had already hidden themselves and wouldn't reveal themselves on normal days. However, they would reveal themselves whenever there was an invasion and mercilessly attack the invaders. Even Sky Realm experts wouldn't dare to enter the origin sword world recklessly. Chu Fengmian opened his empty ring and took out a bunch of seeds of sacred herbs. He casually sprinkled them on the ground. The moment the seeds landed on the 5 colors growing soil, they sprouted quickly and sprouted. Based on his calculations, these sacred herbs would mature in at most a few years. In the outside world, sacred herbs that would take hundreds or even thousands of years to mature could mature in just a few years in the origin sword world. As for some elixirs, they could mature in just a month or 2. Moreover, the quality of these elixirs was even better than the elixirs in the outside world. The 5 colors growing soil was constantly absorbing the spiritual energy from the spirit springs. The spiritual energy within the spirit springs would never be depleted. Even so, the consumption of the spirit springs was astronomical. However, the dozen spirit springs that Chu Fengmian had plundered this time were enough to sustain the origin sword world for at least a few hundred years. Sect Master, every time you make a move you are always so generous. The Sword Slayer King, Green Dream, the Yen Emperor, and the other disciples of the Sword Dao sect walked out of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. Looking at the changes in the origin sword world, each of them felt like they were in a dream. If they hadn't witnessed the transformation of the origin sword world with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed that this paradise on earth was the origin sword world. Some of the disciples of the Sword Dao sect sat down on the ground and began to cultivate after sensing the pure spiritual energy in the origin sword world. In just a few breaths, a few of the disciples of the Sword Dao sect suddenly broke through to the next level. Such rich spiritual qi was extremely beneficial even for martial artists and demon gods who were half a step away from the celestial being realm. Even experts in the celestial being realm would feel comfortable in it. Sovereign, what about the 5 great sects? Seeing that Chu Fengmian had returned, the Sword Slayer monarch and Qing Meng walked over and asked. Many disciples of the Sword Dao sect looked at Chu Fengmian. The 5 great sects had always been a huge threat to the Sword Dao sect. There are no more 5 major sects in the world, Chu Fengmian said calmly. Hearing Chu Fengmian's casual words, everyone's face was filled with shock. These 5 great sects were annihilated by Chu Fengmian just like that? Hearing Chu Fengmian's relaxed tone, it was as simple as crushing a few ants. All right. The damn 5 great sects are finally annihilated. Many disciples of the Sword Dao sect cheered. Previously, when the 5 great sects attacked the northern region, half of the disciples of the Sword Dao sect died in the hands of the 5 great sections. Now that they heard that the 5 great sects were annihilated, the disciples of the Sword Dao sect were extremely excited. The Sword Slayer monarch, He Luo, Qing Meng and the others also showed some relief on their faces. The stone that had been weighing on their hearts was finally removed. However, Chu Fengmian knew that the 5 great sects were nothing compared to the countless forces in the 9 regions. Not to mention the giants like the Alliance of 100 Extreme Star Regions, some sects in the second-grade star regions, such as the Oceanic Sacrifice sect, were far superior to the 5 great sections. Moreover, second-grade star regions were nothing. The 3 great saint regions were the truly terrifying ones. The scene of a spatial crack suddenly opening in the dark whale, hidden treasure and hundreds of celestial being experts pouring out of it was still vivid in Chu Fengmian's mind. Any one of the 3 sacred realms had hundreds of celestial realm experts, and some even had profound heaven realm experts. The current sword origin world was still too weak. Qing Meng, Luo He, Emperor Yan, and Yan Hanshi, the 4 of you are only 1 step away from the celestial being realm. It is the true fortune of the Sword Dao sect that you have stepped into the celestial being realm. Chu Fengmian looked at Qing Meng and the others and said. The 4 of them were now at the peak of the half-step celestial being realm. Now that Chu Fengmian had brought a large number of saint elixirs, it was enough to support them to break through to the celestial being realm. Now, in the Sword Dao sect, there were only 3 celestial being experts, Han Yueli, Luo Shi, and Mad Dragon Emperor, excluding Chu Fengmian. This number was still too few. If Qing Meng and the others also stepped into the celestial being realm, then the Sword Dao sect would have 7 celestial being experts. In this way, even some forces from the extraterritorial star regions would not dare to provoke the Sword Dao sect. If you don't step into the celestial being realm, you are indeed insignificant. Only those in the celestial being realm can be considered expert. We are planning to go into seclusion to break through to the celestial being realm, Qing Meng said. She already had the idea of breaking through to the celestial being realm. In the Daluo star regions, half-step celestial being realm experts were invincible. As for the celestial being realm, it was an illusory existence. But now, the upheaval of the 9 regions had attracted experts from hundreds and thousands of star regions to the 9 regions. Even the number of celestial being realm experts in the 9 regions was not small. Their half-step celestial being realm experts were simply insignificant. In front of a true celestial being realm expert, they were nothing. This time, the attack of the 5 major sects had made them feel a sense of crisis. Each of them had made up their minds to go into seclusion to break through to the celestial being realm. During this time, the matters of the Sword Dao sect will be handled by the Sword Slayer King. Chu Fengmian said. In a few days I will leave the Sword Dao sect, but I will still be in the 9 regions. If there is anything, you can directly send a message to me. Chu Fengmian instructed. Calculating the time, Prince Xia and the others should have already left the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance for the 9 regions. In a few days they would arrive at the 9 regions. Prince Xia was just a small figure and was not worthy of Chu Fengmian's attention. However, Chu Fengmian still wanted to use him to lure out the Tianxing Jiandi behind him. Chu Fengmian was determined to get the supreme sword qi in Tianxing Jiandi's hands. Moreover, Chu Fengmian was also somewhat interested in the small world that Tianxing Jiandi had talked about with the martial ghost ancestor. First, he set a small goal such as 1 second. Remember, Bookhouse. Chapter 2103. A small world that had never been discovered by anyone was like an undiscovered treasure trove. Although there were dangers within it, riches and honor came from risk. The more dangerous it was, the greater the hidden opportunity. Given Chu Fengmian's current strength, ordinary dangerous places wouldn't be able to trap him. Moreover, he had plenty of life-saving means that were stronger than many immortal generals and demon immortals. Chu Fengmian was confident that he could escape unscathed after exploring some dangerous places. Chu Fengmian prepared to leave after giving his instructions. Sir. Just then, the Mad Dragon Emperor suddenly turned his head and spoke to Chu Fengmian. What's the matter, Dragon Emperor? Chu Fengmian asked in surprise. Sir, I plan to merge the Blue Dragon sect into the Sword Dao sect and make it a branch of the sect. What do you think? The Mad Dragon Emperor asked. I plan to have all the disciples of the Blue Dragon sect come to the Sword Origin world and cultivate there. The Mad Dragon Emperor was well aware of the miraculous nature of this sacred ground. The demon immortals and demon immortals here would cultivate much faster than those outside. Although the Blue Dragon sect occupied the Blue Dragon Star region and could be considered a hegemon, its resources were far from enough to nurture all of its disciples. However, if one came to the Origin Sword world, the incomparably pure spiritual energy in the Origin Sword world was the best resource. Every breath one took to cultivate in the Sword Origin world was no less than the spiritual pills they consumed. Moreover, the spiritual energy was incomparably pure and didn't have any side effects. The Blue Dragon tribe was already on the decline. If the Blue Dragon sect were to join the Sword Dao sect and all of its disciples were to come to the Sword Origin world, the Blue Dragon tribe would be able to produce a few experts given their aptitude and revitalize the tribe. The Mad Dragon Emperor had originally planned to let the Blue Dragon sect join the Sword Dao sect when he chose to submit to Chu Fengmian. However, he was hesitant because the Blue Dragon sect occupied a starfield after all. But now that the Sword Origin world had been upgraded, the Mad Dragon Emperor's hesitation completely disappeared. If all of the Blue Dragon sect's disciples were to come to the Sword Origin world, it wouldn't be impossible to revitalize the Blue Dragon tribe in the future. Since the Dragon Emperor has such thoughts, I naturally welcome them. The Blue Dragon sect will be merged into the Sword Dao sect and become the Blue Dragon Hall. Chu Fengmian nodded after hearing the Mad Dragon Emperor's words. Now that he had the Dragon Lord token, he was the Dragon Lord of the entire Azure Dragon race. In fact, the Azure Dragon sect and the Sword Dao Gate were both forces under Chu Fengmian's command. Since Chu Fengmian had chosen to take the Dragon Lord token, he wouldn't give up on the Azure Dragon tribe. Besides, the Sword Path sect wasn't considered strong in the 9 regions. If it wasn't for Chu Fengmian, these 5 sects would have posed a great threat to the Sword Dao sect. The addition of the Blue Dragon sect to the Sword Dao Gate would also be of great help to the Sword Dao Gate. After all, the Sword Origin world had already expanded by 3 times. Not to mention 1 Blue Dragon sect joining, even if 10 Blue Dragon sects joined, there would still be space. Thank you, young master. Mad Dragon Emperor said gratefully when he heard Chu Fengmian's agreement. The Sword Origin world was created by Chu Fengmian alone. If the Azure Dragon sect were to join the Sword Dao sect and enter the Sword Origin world, it would be an advantage for them. Mad Dragon Emperor thanked Chu Fengmian profusely and hurriedly left. he used a sound transmission jade talisman to inform Yin Longxian to bring her disciples to the Sword Origin world. Han Yueli and Luo Shi returned to the Sword Origin world and went into secluded cultivation. The two of them had just stepped into the Heaven Realm and their cultivation wasn't stable yet. They wanted to go into secluded cultivation to stabilize their realm. Moreover, the battle with Thunder Hall's mountain master Fengqing Zi had given them a lot of benefits. Now that Chu Fengmian had brought so many saint pills, the two of them didn't lack resources at all to improve their strength. What they lacked was the comprehension of the martial Tao. If one's comprehension of the martial Tao was insufficient, even if one's cultivation was high, their brute strength would be meaningless. Therefore, the major sects rarely chose to give their disciples a large number of spirit pills or saint pills to help them break through. With the thousands of saint pills that Chu Fengmian brought back, almost all of the Sword Tao sect's disciples could break through to the Emperor realm. However, Chu Fengmian wouldn't do that. Without repeated battles, tempering one's martial Tao, even if one forcibly broke through to the next realm, it would be pointless. Only through repeated battles could a true master be born. It was for this reason that Chu Fengmian took Han Yueli and Luo Shi to attack the 5 great sects when they had just broken through to the Heaven Realm. It was all for the sake of tempering them. After giving all these instructions, Chu Fengmian turned into a streak of light and entered the deepest part of the Sword Origin world. There was an incomparably huge palace here. This palace was the Sword Emperor Palace. With Chu Fengmian's current strength, he didn't need the Sword Emperor Palace to protect him. Therefore, Chu Fengmian left the Sword Emperor Palace in the Sword Origin world. However, other than Chu Fengmian, no one in the Sword Tao sect knew about the Sword Emperor Palace. It was considered a secret chamber in Chu Fengmian's Sword Origin world. As Chu Fengmian's cultivation place, it was located in the deepest part of the Sword Origin world. Even a Heaven Realm master wouldn't be able to find the Sword Emperor Palace. It should have been 2 days since I returned to the 9 territories. I wonder where Prince Xia is now? Chu Fengmian came to the Sword Emperor Palace. A wisp of spirit energy condensed in his palm. With a wave of his hand, a water curtain appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. On the water curtain, Prince Xia and his group appeared. Prince Xia and his group were riding on the ark and heading towards the 9 territories. At a glance, there were more than 100 people in this group. These people were all young Master Xia's subordinate. They were disciples of the 100 Despair Starfields Alliance. They had been brought here by young Master Xia to test whether or not there was any danger in that small world. Because of that, these people were not very strong. Most of them were just Emperor Realm Masters. Chu Fengmian didn't care about them at all. Prince Xia's strength was only at the half-step Heaven Realm. However, there were 2 old men standing behind him, one on his left and one on his right. Seeing these 2 old men, Chu Fengmian was slightly surprised. These 2 old men were Heaven Realm Masters. Although they were only in the Immortal Realm, they had indeed passed the Great Tribulation of the Heaven Realm. These 2 Celestial Realm Elders were actually willing to follow young Master Xia here. It seemed that Prince Xia's identity was indeed noble. He came to the 9 territories with 2 Heaven Realm Masters as guards. However, Prince Xia's father, Martial Ghost Old Ancestor, was an immortal general. With the identity of an immortal general, it wasn't difficult for him to let 2 Immortal Realm Masters protect Prince Xia. Chapter 2104. The strength of an immortal general was enough to easily fight against 10 Immortal Realm martial artists and demon gods. For example, the 9 Suns Emperor Wu could only be considered an ordinary ancestor in the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. Although his position was high, he was far from the upper echelons of the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. As for the Martial Ghost Ancestor, as an immortal general, he was a peerless overlord in the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. He was one of the highest echelons in the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. The difference in status was like heaven and earth. Prince Xia was the only son of the martial ghost ancestor and was doted on by the martial ghost ancestor. Although Chu Fengmian was a little surprised that the martial ghost ancestor sent 2 Immortal Realm martial artists to protect Prince Xia, it wasn't unexpected. Prince Xia's group arrived so quickly. After observing Prince Xia's group, Chu Fengmian suddenly noticed that Prince Xia's group had already passed through the Shattered Stars Belt and entered the Daluotian starfield. They weren't far from the 9 domains. Chu Fengmian had only been in the 9 domains for 2 days. Normally, it would take 5 days for an ordinary half-step celestial realm martial artist or demon god to arrive at the 9 domains by means of an arc. But now, it seemed that Prince Xia's group would arrive at the 9 domains in 2 to 4 hours. It was much faster than Chu Fengmian had expected. This arc is actually a half-step immortal artifact? Chu Fengmian took a glance and understood why Prince Xia's group was so fast. The arc they were sitting on was actually a half-step immortal artifact. The arc was only useful when traveling through the major galaxies. Moreover, for martial artists and demon gods above the celestial realm, their strength was enough to traverse the starry sky with their physical bodies. They did not need the power of the arc at all. Therefore, this arc was only useful to martial artists and demon immortals below the half-step celestial realm. Therefore, the quality of an ordinary arc would not be high. Refining it to the level of a heaven-grade spirit artifact was already extremely extravagant. After all, this arc did not have any effect on the enemy. Using the resources used to refine a heaven-grade spirit artifact to refine an arc was extremely extravagant for most martial artists and demon immortals who were half a step into the celestial realm. It was extremely painful. However, young Master Xia's arc was a half-immortal artifact. It was a half-immortal artifact that could only be refined by a Heaven Realm Weapon Refinement Grandmaster. The value of a half-immortal artifact was dozens of times higher than an ordinary Heaven Realm Spirit artifact. Young Master Xia must have a lot of good stuff on him. Chu Fengmian's artifact. Even the arc was a half-immortal artifact. Young Master Xia definitely had more than one half-immortal artifact. Chu Fengmian didn't lack half-step immortal artifact. To him, half-step immortal artifacts weren't very useful. However, half-step immortal artifacts were still extremely rare in the Sword Dao sect. Moreover, Prince Xia's treasures weren't few in number. Prince Xia's father, Martial Ghost Old Ancestor, was an immortal general expert. He must have obtained a lot of treasures when he came to the 9 regions. That was why he bestowed them to Prince Xia. While Chu Fengmian was still observing, a half-step celestial realm martial artist on the arc suddenly spoke. He looked at Prince Xia and said respectfully, "Prince Xia, we're about to arrive at the 9 regions. May I know why we're heading to the 9 regions this time?" The half-step celestial realm martial artist's tone was extremely respectful. Although his realm was the same as young Master Xia's, half-step celestial realm, his strength was even stronger than that of young Master Xia, who had used treasures to forcibly raise his realm. But now, when he faced Prince Xia, he had the attitude of a servant and his tone was extremely respectful. A half-step celestial realm martial artist could be regarded as an overlord in some third-grade star regions. However, in the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance, a half-step celestial realm martial artist was nothing. In the entire 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance, there were hundreds of celestial realm experts. Prince Xia's father was an invincible immortal general expert. Even among the ancestors of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance, his status was extremely high. He could easily crush Prince Xia to death with just a flick of his finger. Therefore, although this half-step celestial realm martial artist was stronger than Prince Xia, he could only consider himself a servant. "Are we reaching the 9 regions soon?" Prince Xia sat on the tallest throne in the arc. The 2 immortal realm elders could only stand behind him, showing his status as the moon surrounded by stars. We'll reach the 9 regions in 2 hours. Another disciple of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance hurriedly answered Prince Xia's question. Yes. Prince Xia slowly stood up from the throne, glanced at the disciples of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance, and spoke. This time, I came to the 9 regions under orders to explore a small world. Since you've chosen to submit to me, I'll give you a chance to explore that small world. A small world that has never been born before, and it contains endless opportunities. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you. A small world that has never been born before. We're going to explore it? Is this true? Gosh, this is a great opportunity. This is the 9 regions. Every inch of land contains treasures. It's actually a small world that has never been born before. If we can get some resources from it, it'll be enough for us to use for a lifetime. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, many disciples of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance were extremely excited and discussed loudly. This is a great opportunity given to you by the young master. You must remember to serve the young master well in the future. Do you understand? Standing beside Prince Xia, a half-step Celestial Realm elder snorted coldly and reprimanded. This elder was Protector Lu, whom Chu Fengmian had met before. Although he was only a half-step Celestial Realm expert, he was Prince Xia's favorite, so his status was extremely high. Yes, we'll do our best to serve the young master. Among the martial artists and demon gods who were reprimanded, there were also some half-step Celestial Realm martial artists and demon gods, but they still dared not refute a single word. Although they were reprimanded, the excitement in the eyes of the disciples of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance did not diminish at all. This was a treasure trove that had suddenly appeared in front of them. A small world that has never been born before. It's said that in the 9 regions there were Celestial Realm, Mystic Heaven Realm, and even Celestial Realm experts everywhere. If there are treasures left behind by Mystic Heaven Realm experts or even Celestial Realm experts, wouldn't it be a great leap forward? I really can't write anything today, so I'll stop here. I'll go to bed early and try to wake up early tomorrow. End of chapter. Chapter 2105. This is a pocket dimension that has never appeared before. Will there be any danger in it? Some of the 100 Extremes Star Domain Alliance's martial artists said worriedly. What's the big deal about danger? Wealth comes from danger. If you're afraid of danger, then leave as soon as possible. If I can get the opportunity in it, my strength will definitely skyrocket. At that time, I won't be manipulated by others. Some of the 100 Extremes Star Domain Alliance's disciples said coldly in their hearts. A bunch of trash. Prince Xia, who was sitting on the throne, looked at the discussion below with disdain in his eyes. He didn't put these people in his eyes at all. He only brought them here to test the dangers of the pocket dimension. As for these people, they were just cannon fodder. Even if he obtained the opportunity, he would not hesitate to kill them all and snatch all the opportunities for himself. Protector Lu, is the kid who got the treasures of the 9 regions in the 9 regions now? Prince Xia suddenly asked Protector Lu, who was beside him. Prince Xia was actually talking about Chu Fengmian. These people are actually talking about me? Suddenly, Chu Fengmian saw Prince Xia talking about Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian didn't say anything. He also wanted to know what Prince Xia was planning to do. This person is still in the 9 regions. I have already tampered with his identity card. When we reach the 9 regions, we can find that kid at any time. Protector Lu said with a cold smile. That's good. It was indeed a miscalculation to let that kid leave alive last time. Since that's the case, there are many treasures on him. When we reach the 9 regions, we'll kill that kid first to prevent others from getting there first. Prince Xia said with a greedy look in his eyes. When he thought that Chu Fengmian might have the treasures of the 9 regions, he couldn't wait to kill Chu Fengmian and get the treasures. There's no need for young master to do it personally. This subordinate will be enough to deal with a small 9 tribulations, Emperor Gu. Protector Lu said softly. No need. This time, I will do it myself. I feel that the boy's strength is not as simple as it seems. But this time, I have 2 celestial realm experts with me. No matter how capable the boy is, he will definitely die. Prince Xia said coldly. After exchanging a few more words, the voices in the ark gradually quieted down. This Prince Xia is really careful. In the Sword Emperor Palace, Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh after hearing Prince Xia's words. Although this Prince Xia appeared to be arrogant and condescending, he was extremely careful in doing things. In order to deal with Chu Fengmian, a mere 9 tribulations Emperor Gu, he actually brought 2 celestial realm experts to deal with Chu Fengmian this time. This was the so-called complete preparation. There were 2 experts in the celestial realm. Even if Chu Fengmian had concealed his realm and was only a half-step into the celestial realm, he would definitely die if he encountered 2 experts in the celestial realm. With 2 old men of the immortal realm protecting young Master Xia, it could be said that as long as young Master Xia did not go and provoke any of the strong forces of the 9 regions, he could do whatever he wanted. Even if it were any ordinary forces, they would not be willing to lay their hands on him. However, this time, Prince Xia had encountered an iron plate. With Chu Fengmian's strength, if he wanted to kill Prince Xia, these 2 immortal realm experts wouldn't be able to stop Chu Fengmian at all. There's still 2 hours left. After 2 hours, Prince Xia and his party would arrive at the 9 regions. At that time, it would be time for Chu Fengmian to make his move. Originally, Chu Fengmian was ready to kill Prince Xia. Now that Prince Xia had his eyes on Chu Fengmian and was ready to make the first move, Chu Fengmian would beat him at his own game. He would lure Prince Xia to a remote place and kill him first. However, during these 2 hours, Chu Fengmian still had some things to do in the Sword Emperor Palace. Elder Fan, how is the demonic will on the primordial sword and demon Emperor Blood Demon's heart being neutralized? Chu Fengmian suddenly asked softly. The figure of an old man appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. The old man appeared with a jade box in his hand. Inside the box were the primordial sword and demon Emperor Blood Demon's heart. The jade box was filled with colored glaze clean water. When Chu Fengmian had rushed back to the 9 regions from the Azure Dragon Star region, he had given a large amount of colored glaze clean water to Elder Fan so that he could neutralize the demonic will on the primordial sword and demon Emperor Blood Demon's heart. However, the demonic will on the primordial sword and demon Emperor Blood Demon's heart was much stronger than the demonic will on the 6-winged centipede. After a few days, only a small part of the demonic will on the primordial sword had been neutralized. The demonic will on the demon Emperor Blood Demon's heart didn't seem to have decreased much. Although Chu Fengmian could see that the colored glaze clean water was indeed neutralizing the demonic will on the primordial sword, the demonic will on the primordial sword didn't seem to have decreased much. However, the demonic will on the 2 treasures was so strong that it couldn't be completely neutralized in a short time. Therefore, Chu Fengmian had always left this matter to Elder Fan. Chu Fengmian had encountered many things after returning to the 9 regions. Now, he finally had the time to take a look at the primordial sword and demon Emperor Blood Demon's heart. The demon Emperor Blood Demon's heart in the jade box had shrunk considerably. It was now only the size of a fist. However, Chu Fengmian knew that this wasn't because the power on the demon Emperor Blood Demon's heart had dissipated. Instead, the demon Emperor Blood Demon's heart had deliberately shrunk its power to resist the purification of the colored glaze clean water. Although the demon Emperor Blood Demon had fallen hundreds of thousands of years ago, his heart was still beating as if it were alive. It even had a consciousness that could resist the purification of the colored glaze clean water. In a short time, a large amount of the colored glaze clean water had been used on the heart. However, Chu Fengmian didn't care about the consumption of the colored glaze clean water. During this trip to the vast sea star region, Chu Fengmian had swept up all the colored glaze clean water in the sea sacrifice sect. Now, Chu Fengmian's empty ring was filled to the brim with colored glaze clean water. As long as the colored glaze clean water continued to purify, the demonic will on the demon emperor blood demon's heart would be completely neutralized one day. When that time came, Chu Fengmian would be able to obtain the demon emperor's heart. Compared to the demon emperor blood demon's heart, the primordial sword was in a much better state. The primordial sword had pierced the demon emperor blood demon's heart and had been severely contaminated by the demonic will. However, it was still much less than the demonic will on the demon emperor blood demon's heart. It seemed like the demonic will on the primordial sword had been neutralized by about a third. Let's set a small goal first. For example, 1 second. Chapter 2106. The demonic will on the primordial sword will be completely dispelled in a month. Elder Fan appeared and looked at the primordial sword. As the sword spirit of the primordial sword, he was familiar with the sword's condition. The primordial sword had pierced into demon emperor blood demon's heart and was constantly being eroded by his demonic blood. Now, the demonic will was very deep. Even with the colored glaze clean water, it would still take a month to dispel the demonic will. A month's time. There's no need to rush. Chu Fengmian muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with anticipation as he looked at the Taichu sword edge. As long as the demonic will on the Taichu sword edge was completely dissolved, it would be able to merge with the Taichu sword hilt and restore the true appearance of the Taichu sword. The primordial sword was one of the first sword emperor's 4 great spirit swords and an extreme immortal weapon. Once it was restored, it would be a complete extreme immortal weapon. The power it contained wasn't something that the mortal Emperor Jar, an incomplete extreme immortal weapon, could compare to. The mortal Emperor Jar was only an incomplete extreme immortal weapon, but in Chu Fengmian's hands, it could already erupt with terrifying power. The primordial sword was a true extreme immortal weapon and a spirit sword. It was the most suitable weapon for Chu Fengmian. If Chu Fengmian could use the power of the primordial sword to fight, he would be able to easily slay even immortal generals. Even if he encountered profound heaven immortal marquises, Chu Fengmian would have the ability to fight. For Chu Fengmian, the best way to improve his strength was to break through to the next realm. However, the amount of resources required for his celestial tribulation was an astronomical figure. It would be extremely difficult to accumulate enough resources. Moreover, Chu Fengmian knew that his celestial tribulation would be incomparably dangerous. For him, unless he was fully prepared, he wouldn't take the risk to break through the celestial tribulation. Unable to break through to the next realm, Chu Fengmian's strength had fallen into a bottleneck. It wouldn't be easy for him to improve further. The Taichu sword was the best way for Chu Fengmian to increase his powers. However, it would take a month for the demonic will to be completely dispelled. Chu Fengmian needed to wait a month for the demonic will to completely dissipate. Then, he would be able to combine the blade and hilt of the Taichu sword and transform it into a true Taichu sword. I'll leave the primordial sword edge and the demon emperor's heart to you, Elder Fan. Chu Fengmian said to Elder Fan. Rest assured, young master. Elder Fan said with a smile. He took a look at Chu Fengmian, and his expression suddenly changed. Young master, have you comprehended the third sword? That's right. I've completely comprehended the third sword, the 6 directions mysterious water sword. Chu Fengmian nodded. Chu Fengmian wasn't surprised that Elder Fan could tell that Chu Fengmian had already comprehended the 6 directions mysterious water sword. After all, Elder Fan was the sword spirit of the Taichu sword and had once followed the number 1 sword emperor. He could easily tell that Chu Fengmian had comprehended the first sword technique. I've completely comprehended it. Elder Fan was stunned when he heard Chu Fengmian's answer. He was speechless for a long time. Although he had once witnessed Chu Fengmian's ability to comprehend the sword principle and how heaven-defying it was, he also felt that no matter how monstrous Chu Fengmian was, before he reached the celestial realm, Chu Fengmian would at most be able to comprehend the 3 suns blazing sword and the 4 winds sword. As for the third sword technique, the 6 directions mysterious water sword, Chu Fengmian would only be able to comprehend it after reaching the celestial realm. He didn't expect Chu Fengmian to comprehend the 6 directions mysterious water sword before reaching the peak of the half-step celestial realm. This was far beyond his expectations. Perhaps even the number 1 sword emperor, whose name had once shaken the world, couldn't compare to Chu Fengmian in terms of sword principles when he was young. I need to leave for a while. Seeing that Elder Fan was fine, Chu Fengmian took a step forward and left the Sword Emperor Palace. He left the Sword Origin world and returned to the 9 domains. He still needed to wait a month for the primordial sword edge. During this time, Chu Fengmian couldn't relax. He had to look for opportunities to improve his strength. The upheaval of the 9 domains was a sign that the celestial 9 domains were about to appear. Chu Fengmian felt extremely anxious after knowing this. He was also worried that the celestial 9 domains might appear at any time. It would be truly troublesome for Chu Fengmian at that time. The upheaval of the 9 domains and the arrival of countless experts from the extraterritorial starry skies were nothing compared to the emergence of the celestial 9 domains. The experts of the celestial 9 domains had besieged and killed the Lord of the Sword Dao, who had stepped into the immortal Emperor realm and become a ruler. Chu Fengmian's strength wasn't even 1/10,000th of the Lord of the Sword Dao. Chu Fengmian wanted to avenge the Lord of the Sword Dao. His strength had to surpass the Lord of the Sword Dao in order to have a chance of revenge. Immortal stones. I need a large amount of immortal stones. Only immortal stones can help me break through to the next realm. It is said that some of the treasures in the 9 domains already have traces of immortal stones. What Chu Fengmian needed the most now were immortal stones. Only immortal stones could support Chu Fengmian's breakthrough to the celestial realm. Chu Fengmian's countless opportunities and various fortuitous encounters could only show their true power after he stepped into the celestial realm. Just like Chu Fengmian's immortal true body, it was said that any demon god who had condensed an immortal true body would obtain great benefits once they stepped into the celestial realm. Chu Fengmian had not only condensed an immortal true body, but also cultivated it to the 3rd level. Once he stepped into the celestial realm, he would definitely obtain great benefit. Once he stepped into the celestial realm, his strength would definitely skyrocket by dozens or even hundreds of times. At that time, Chu Fengmian would be a true expert. Therefore, even if it was extremely difficult to break through to the celestial realm, Chu Fengmian had to find opportunities to accumulate resources and immortal stones to prepare for the breakthrough. While thinking, Chu Fengmian's escape light had already left the Sword Origin world and arrived in the 9 domains. His figure flew all the way north. In the north of the northern domain was a huge ocean called the North Sea. The North Sea had always been an incomparably desolate place with few people. Chu Fengmian was preparing to make his move in the North Sea and kill Prince Xia and his group. After arriving in the North Sea, Chu Fengmian found an uninhabited island and sat down quietly. He suddenly took out a jade talisman from his spatial ring. End of chapter. Chapter 2107. This Jade Talisman was the Jade Talisman of the 100 Extremes Star Domain Alliance. Only those who possessed the Jade Talisman were considered members of the 100 Extremes Star Domain Alliance. It was a symbol of identity. In addition to the function of identity, the Jade Talisman also had some tricks inside. At a glance, there was a spiritual energy hidden in the Jade Talisman. This spiritual energy could let people detect Chu Fengmian's location. It was deliberately left behind by Protector Lu to track Chu Fengmian's location. However, Chu Fengmian had already seen through the strangeness of the Jade Talisman. He used his spiritual energy to form a restriction and sealed Protector Lu's spiritual energy, making it impossible for Protector Lu to pinpoint Chu Fengmian's location. Chu Fengmian's current strength was not inferior to an ordinary immortal general expert. How could he be monitored by a half-step celestial realm warrior? However, this time, Chu Fengmian deliberately lured Prince Xia and the others over. Chu Fengmian sat on the ground. With a point of his finger, the restriction shattered, allowing Protector Lu to detect his location. After doing all this, Chu Fengmian sat on the ground and consolidated his realm. After an hour, Chu Fengmian slowly opened his eyes. With a point of his finger, balls of water spiritual energy emerged. The balls of water spiritual energy emerged and began to condense into a water mirror. In it, one could clearly see the appearance of Prince Xia and the others. Prince Xia and the others had already arrived at the 9 regions. Protector Lu urged his spiritual energy to find Chu Fengmian's location. Soon, Prince Xia directly controlled the arc and flew in the direction of Chu Fengmian. "We're almost there." Chu Fengmian chuckled when he saw this. He had deliberately set up a spell formation in the middle of a cave on the island. Chu Fengmian sat there, seemingly in the middle of cultivation, oblivious to everything that was happening around him. After a while, the power of heaven and earth suddenly descended. It was a half-step celestial realm warrior who had arrived on the deserted island. Streaks of light flew down from the arc. Among them, Prince Xia also walked out from the throne. His gaze fell in the direction of a cave on the deserted island. "That kid is hiding in here?" Young Master Xia glanced in the direction of the cave and asked Protector Lu beside him. Reporting to Young Master, "That brat is inside." Protector Lu said respectfully. "Is there any danger inside?" Prince Xia spoke again, but this time, he spoke to one of the 2 Celestial Realm elders standing behind him. The Celestial Realm old man scanned the cave and saw through all the restrictions and formations with a single glance. He was able to see through the scene inside with just a single glance. He then asked, "That's right. There's only one person inside, but he's not Emperor Gu of the 9 tribulations. He's a half-step celestial being." "Oh? Half-step celestial realm, that brat indeed concealed his strength." Hearing this, Prince Xia sneered. "Looks like that brat is still hiding some secret. He has a large amount of divine-grade spiritual stones on him. He must have obtained some treasures in the 9 regions. The divine-grade spiritual stones may only be a small part of the treasures." As Prince Xia spoke, his eyes became increasingly greedy. The divine-grade spiritual stones were nothing in the 9 regions' treasures. In some of the 9 regions' treasures, even immortal artifacts, immortal stones, and even precious immortal elixirs had appeared. He was sure that Chu Fengmian must have other treasures on him. Otherwise, Chu Fengmian would not have handed over the divine-grade spiritual stones so easily under his coercion. After confirming that Chu Fengmian was alone, Prince Xia no longer had any scruples. He waved his hand and spoke to the demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm. "You guys go and capture that brat. Remember to capture him alive, understand?" "Yes." A total of 5 demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm walked out of the crowd. Without hesitation, they rushed towards the cave where Chu Fengmian was. Suddenly, they gathered their spiritual power and attacked. Waves of spiritual energy bombarded the cave, shattering the restriction array formation above the cave. At the same time, they saw Chu Fengmian, who was sitting in the cave. The moment the 5 demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm saw Chu Fengmian, they looked at each other. Then, in the next moment, they gathered their spiritual power and turned it into chains, binding Chu Fengmian. The 5 demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm also obeyed Prince Xia's order to capture Chu Fengmian alive. They were ready to join forces and suppress Chu Fengmian. However, just as the chains were about to reach Chu Fengmian suddenly opened his eyes. Chu Fengmian opened his eyes like a real dragon that had suddenly awakened. The aura on his body was completely different. This aura surprised the 5 demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm. Then, with a cold look in his eyes, he urged the chains to fly towards Chu Fengmian from all directions. Bam! 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 The moment the chains approached Chu Fengmian, a wave of spiritual power suddenly burst out from Chu Fengmian's body and swept across. The chains had just been unsealed when Chu Fengmian's body was swept by the spiritual power and shattered. At the same time, the broken chains were controlled by a huge force and directly attacked the 5 demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm. The speed was so fast that the 5 demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm could not react. Their bodies were instantly shattered when they collided with the chains. Even their blood essence was completely shattered, leaving not a single drop. They did not even have the chance to reconstruct their bodies. In an instant, the 5 demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm had all fallen. What's going on? What just happened? The disciples of the 100 Territories Alliance, not far away, did not see clearly what had just happened. But in the blink of an eye, they saw the scene of the 5 demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm falling, and were very surprised. Even young Master Xia had a look of surprise in his eyes. He did not expect Chu Fengmian to directly kill the 5 demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm with one move. Moreover, Chu Fengmian's reaction was also beyond his expectations. Especially when Chu Fengmian opened his eyes and saw them, there was not the slightest panic in his eyes. It seemed that Chu Fengmian had already known that they were coming. All of this made Prince Xia suddenly feel a little uneasy. It seemed that the current situation and his plan had changed. First, he set a small target, such as 1 second. Remember, Bookhouse. Chapter 2108. But soon, Prince Xia calmed down. He carefully observed and confirmed that Chu Fengmian was indeed alone. There were no helpers around Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian was alone. No matter how strong Chu Fengmian was, Prince Xia was not afraid at all. Even though Chu Fengmian's strength was beyond Prince Xia's expectations, he was fully prepared to deal with Chu Fengmian this time. He even brought 2 celestial realm experts with him. Not bad, not bad. With such strength, it seems that you have indeed found a treasure in the 9 regions, and even a great opportunity. Prince Xia looked at Chu Fengmian. The greed in his eyes became even more intense. The more powerful Chu Fengmian was, the more certain his guess was. Chu Fengmian did indeed have the treasures of the 9 regions on him. He might even have obtained heaven-shaking opportunities from the 9 regions. That was why he had such strength. Today, as long as he could kill Chu Fengmian, all of Chu Fengmian's opportunities would belong to him. All of the treasures would be his. Boy, I'll give you one last chance. Obediently hand over all the opportunities on your body, then kneel down and acknowledge me as your master. This young master will spare your life on account of your aptitude. As long as you work well for this young master, I can give you treasures in the future to help you step into the celestial realm. How about it? Prince Xia's eyes flashed with killing intent. Not only did his eyes flash, but it seemed that he had other thoughts in his mind. He looked at Chu Fengmian and said, "Is that so? Kneel down and acknowledge you as my master? Just by relying on a piece of trash like you?" Chu Fengmian listened to Prince Xia's words and sneered. The disdain in his tone was undisguised. Hearing Chu Fengmian's ridicule, Prince Xia's face became extremely ugly. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Chu Fengmian. He couldn't wait to tear Chu Fengmian into pieces. "Very well, boy. Since you are not willing to submit to me, you will die today. Go, kill him." Prince Xia raised his hand and pointed at Chu Fengmian. Behind him, one of the 2 celestial realm elders, an eagle-nosed elder, stepped out. His eyes fell directly on Chu Fengmian, and he said coldly, "Boy, kill yourself and I'll leave your corpse intact," the eagle-nosed elder said. He didn't take Chu Fengmian seriously. After all, in the eyes of a true Celestial Realm warrior, any warrior below the Celestial Realm was an ant. Even in the three sacred realm was. Such a character was 1 in a million, 1 in a million. 1 in 100 million was even in the three sacred realms. Was a peon 1 in a million, 1 in a 1 in 1, was 1 in a 1 in 1. He didn't believe that he could meet such a genius. Was ready, he was ready and was ready, was ready, and was ready, was. Ready was he. However, Chu Fengmian didn't feel any of this. He still had an incomparably relaxed expression. He looked at the eagle-nosed elder with cold eyes. "Old man, get lost if you don't want to die. The person I want to kill today is Prince Ya. If you get lost now, I can let you live." Chu Fengmian's tone was incomparably calm, but the content of his words was extremely arrogant. Not far away, the disciples of the 100 Extremes Star Domain Alliance were stunned when they heard Chu Fengmian's words. In the next moment, they let out countless mocking laughter. "This boy dares to threaten Ancestor Ouyang? He doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. A mere half-step celestial realm dares to threaten an ancestor of the celestial realm? How many moves do you think Ancestor Ouyang will need to kill this boy? How many moves? I'm afraid this boy can't even withstand one move." Those disciples of the 100 Extremes Star Domain Alliance looked at Chu Fengmian as if they were looking at a dead man. Although the half-step Celestial Being Realm and the Celestial Being Realm were only one step apart, this step was like a chasm that could not be crossed. Any warrior of the half-step Celestial Being Realm who dared to provoke an expert of the Celestial Being Realm would only have a dead end. In their view, Chu Fengmian's words were simply courting death. At this time, he still dared to provoke. What an arrogant junior! The eagle-nosed elder and Ancestor Ouyang heard Chu Fengmian's words and snorted coldly. Their faces were filled with boundless anger, and they immediately attacked. Die. As soon as Ancestor Ouyang attacked, he waved his hand and the spiritual energy that had been shrouding Chu Fengmian suddenly condensed and turned into a spiritual energy impact, bombarding Chu Fengmian. This move was pure brute force without any fancy tricks, but it was the best move for a Celestial Realm martial artist to deal with a half-step Celestial Realm martial artist and demon god. If he used martial arts, it was still possible to be seen through and resisted. However, the difference in strength between a Celestial Realm martial artist and a half-step Celestial Realm martial artist was dozens of times. This gap couldn't be made up at all. This spiritual energy bombardment was the most powerful move. The violent spiritual energy condensed from Chu Fengmian's body like a long river and bombarded Chu Fengmian's body. It wanted to crush Chu Fengmian in this long river. However, this violent long river of spiritual energy disappeared the moment it bombarded Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian stood there and let the long river of spiritual energy wash over him, but it couldn't hurt Chu Fengmian at all. Taking a closer look, one could see that a golden barrier appeared about 3 inches away from Chu Fengmian. On it, one could faintly see the appearance of dragon scales. However, the long river of spiritual energy completely disappeared the moment it bombarded the barrier. Is this the defensive technique of the Dragon Clan? Ancient Dragon Emperor body? Ancestor Ouyang looked at the barrier that appeared beside Chu Fengmian and immediately thought of what this barrier was. It was the supreme defensive technique of the Dragon Clan. Even among the Dragon Clan, there are not many Celestial Realm Dragon Emperors who have cultivated this ancient Dragon Emperor body. How could you have cultivated it? Ancestor Ouyang was surprised for a moment, and then his eyes became cold again. However, if you want to rely on this ancient Dragon Emperor body to contend against me, You are daydreaming. The gap between our realms is not something that your defensive technique can make up for. As Ancestor Ouyang spoke, he condensed his spiritual energy again, but this time, he changed his tactic. He condensed his spiritual energy and displayed a supreme immortal technique. This spiritual energy condensed above his head and suddenly turned into a scorching sun. Chapter 2109. Blazing Sun Burns the Sky. This blazing sun condensed above old Ancestor Ouyang's head, exuding boundless flames. The scorching temperature made Prince Xia and the others retreat repeatedly. It seemed that once they got close to this blazing sun, they would be burned to ashes. Looking at Chu Fengmian, old Ancestor Ouyang took a step forward and approached Chu Fengmian. The blazing sun also approached Chu Fengmian. Suddenly, the space around Chu Fengmian was set ablaze by this blazing sun. The blazing sun that had been condensed seemed to have plucked the massive sun from the boundless starry sky for his own use. Although everyone knew that this blazing sun was only condensed by old Ancestor Ouyang using his immortal technique, its power was no less than a real sun. The moment this blazing sun condensed, the seawater in the surrounding North Sea evaporated. If an Emperor Realm cultivator got close to it, he would be roasted dry by the heat. A half-step Celestial Realm brat forced me to use my immortal technique. Even if you die, you should feel honored. Old Ancestor Ouyang sneered. The blazing sun immediately pressed down on Chu Fengmian. The endless heat turned into a heat wave and shrouded him. Rumble! This blazing sun fell from the sky and fell on Chu Fengmian. It wanted to envelop Chu Fengmian's body and burn him alive. Immortal technique? You didn't even condense your immortal force. The immortal technique you used is just the tip of the iceberg. How dare you use it in front of me? Chu Fengmian looked at the descending blazing sun with deep disdain in his eyes. He suddenly took a step forward and condensed a dragon force from his palm. It shrouded Chu Fengmian's right hand and immediately turned into a dragon claw. Break! Chu Fengmian arrived in front of the blazing sun in one step. His right hand turned into a dragon claw and slammed down on the blazing sun. Rumble! The power of this claw was so great that it shook the heavens and earth. Even the cultivators and demon gods within a radius of tens or hundreds of kilometers could feel it clearly. Fortunately, this was the extremely remote North Sea. It was sparsely populated and no one was willing to set foot here. Otherwise, this claw attack would attract the attention of countless experts. The island beneath Chu Fengmian's feet shook continuously under the impact of this claw. The island had only suffered a small portion of the aftershocks. The true power had been bombarded by the scorching sun. Bang! The blazing sun was shattered into pieces by the claw. Not a single trace of it was left behind. With one claw, the scorching sun formed by Patriarch Ouyang's condensed spiritual power was easily destroyed. Old Ancestor Ouyang's expression changed. He had not expected Chu Fengmian's strength to be so terrifying. Even the immortal technique that he had unleashed with his full strength was so fragile. Not only Ancestor Ouyang, but Prince Xia and the other Sky Realm old man's faces also changed. Protector Lu, in particular, looked at Chu Fengmian as if he had seen a ghost. When he first saw Chu Fengmian, he only thought that Chu Fengmian was a nobody who had obtained some opportunities in the 9 domains and could be bullied at will. However, he did not expect Chu Fengmian to be a real dragon. This time, Prince Xia had brought people to besiege Chu Fengmian. It was as if he had walked right into a trap. Die for me. After destroying the scorching sun with one claw, Chu Fengmian strode out again. His figure immediately arrived in front of Ancestor Ouyang. He raised his dragon claw again and fiercely slammed it down. Looking at the dragon claw coming down, Ancestor Ouyang's face was incomparably pale. The claw just now was enough to shatter the scorching sun. How could he bear the power of this claw? Just as he was about to dodge, Chu Fengmian had already arrived in front of him. He did not even have the slightest chance to dodge. He could only brace himself to resist. However, the layers of barriers that he had condensed with his spiritual power were as weak as paper in front of Chu Fengmian's dragon claw. They were instantly destroyed. Boom! The dragon claw bombarded Ancestor Ouyang's body and mercilessly shattered him. At the same time, a black hole appeared behind his body and devoured all of Ancestor Ouyang's blood essence and his empty ring. In just a short moment, Ancestor Ouyang's appearance could no longer be seen in the sky. Even his aura could not be felt. Ancestor Ouyang's blood essence had been completely devoured by the sky-devouring secret skill, cutting off the possibility of his rebirth. A celestial realm expert was easily killed by Chu Fengmian. What's going on? Ancestor Ouyang is a celestial realm ancestor. How could he die in the hands of this person? Some of the disciples of the 100 Extremes Star Domain Alliance roared loudly when they saw this scene. It was as if this scene was beyond their understanding. A half-step celestial realm martial artist actually killed a celestial realm old ancestor so easily? In their hearts, it felt like a dream. However, looking at the disappearing Ancestor Ouyang, their hearts were extremely clear. This was definitely not a dream. A peerless genius. No, this is a monster. A peerless monster. Only the geniuses among the geniuses in the 3 great saint domains can have such strength. Young Master Xia looked at Chu Fengmian and said with a trembling voice. His father was the ancestor of the ghost race, an immortal general expert. The things he knew far surpassed the disciples of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance. Could a half-step celestial realm expert contend with or even kill a celestial realm expert? Yes, the geniuses of the 3 great saint domains could indeed do this. But now, when Chu Fengmian killed Ancestor Ouyang, he didn't just barely kill him, he killed him with a single move. The difference was like heaven and earth. One should know that even a second-order immortal warrior could not kill Ancestor Ouyang with a single move. The person who could do this was at least an immortal general expert. Only an immortal general expert who had condensed immortal energy could suddenly attack and kill an immortal realm expert with a single move. But now, Chu Fengmian could also do this. Did this mean that Chu Fengmian's current strength was at least close to the immortal general realm? A half-step celestial realm expert's true strength was close to the immortal general realm? This strength could only be possessed by those famous geniuses among geniuses and monsters among geniuses in the 3 great saint domains. Even in his dreams, he could not imagine that Chu Fengmian was actually an existence comparable to a peerless monster. End of chapter. Chapter 2110. It was hard for even 1 in a million or 10 million half-step celestial realm martial artists to be born. But now they actually encountered such a peerless genius. At this moment, Prince Xia also knew that he had kicked an iron plate this time. It was no wonder that Chu Fengmian was so calm. From the beginning, Chu Fengmian did not put them in his eyes. Run! Without any hesitation, Prince Xia shouted at the other celestial realm old man behind him and prepared to escape. The half-immortal artifact arc appeared in an instant. Prince Xia and the celestial realm old man immediately entered the arc. The arc was activated and turned into a ray of light, flying towards the 9 heavens, preparing to escape from the 9 domains. When the half-immortal artifact arc was fully powered up, it was actually burning immortal stones. Prince Xia burned dozens of immortal stones in one breath, pushing the half-immortal artifact arc's speed to the extreme. Its speed was much faster than the ordinary celestial realm's flying light. In the blink of an eye, the half-immortal artifact arc had already carried the 2 of them and rushed into the 9 heavens. Prince Xia is indeed worthy of being the martial ghost ancestor, the only son of an immortal general expert. He actually burned immortal stones to activate the half-immortal artifact arc. Chu Fengmian looked at Prince Xia controlling the ark and thought that Prince Xia really had countless treasures. He could take out dozens of immortal stones at any time. The evasive light of this half-immortal artifact was much faster than the evasive light of ordinary immortal realm experts and even immortal warrior experts. With this ark, even if young Master Xia encountered an immortal warrior expert, he would be able to escape unscathed. But this time, Prince Xia encountered Chu Fengmian. In front of Chu Fengmian, not to mention a half-immortal artifact, even a true immortal artifact would not be able to escape from Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and a battle dragon claw ruthlessly fell, killing all the remaining disciples of the 100 Extremes Star Domain Alliance on the island. Now that these people had seen Chu Fengmian's strength, it would be troublesome if this news were to spread. With a single claw, all of the disciples of the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance were killed. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's figure also moved. His figure took a step forward, and the escape light was so fast that it was hard for people to see Chu Fengmian's escape light clearly. It was like a meteor flashing across the sky, chasing after the 9 heavens. That brat shouldn't be able to catch up. Inside the ark, young Master Xia continued to burn the immortal stones, pushing the ark's speed to the maximum. As they headed out of the 9 zones, a pained expression appeared on his face. To a celestial being, each and every one of these immortal stones was incomparably precious. This was especially true for immortal being, immortal warrior, and demon immortals, as they were still unable to naturally condense immortal energy. If one wanted to use immortal energy to activate immortal weapons, immortal arts, etc., one would have to burn immortal stones and use the immortal energy within the immortal stones to activate them. Not only that, but when breaking through to the next realm, a large amount of immortal stones would be required. Each and every one of these stones was incomparably precious. As the only son of Martial Ghost Old Ancestor, Prince Xia had received countless treasures and immortal stones from Martial Ghost Old Ancestor. But now, he was burning dozens of immortal stones, which made his heart ache. But at this time, he had to escape from Chu Fengmian's hands, so he couldn't think too much about it. This time, I didn't expect to encounter such a peerless monster. I've really bumped into an iron plate. Prince Xia's heart was filled with hatred. In order to deal with Chu Fengmian, he wanted to obtain the 9 regions treasure from Chu Fengmian. But this time, he had bumped into an iron plate. Those disciples of the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance had died in Chu Fengmian's hands. He didn't care. But Old Ancestor Ouyang was a celestial realm expert. His father had spent a lot of effort to rope him in. But now, Old Ancestor Ouyang had been killed by Chu Fengmian. This was not only a great loss for him, but also for his father, Martial Ghost Old Ancestor. I don't know which sacred domain this person came from. Why have I never heard of such a person? The celestial realm elder beside Prince Xia said with lingering fear. His strength was on par with Old Ancestor Ouyang. It could be said that if the person who attacked just now wasn't Old Ancestor Ouyang, but him, the person who would be dead now would be him. This was equivalent to a trip to the gates of hell. From what I can see, this kid doesn't look like he's from the 3 Great Saint Domains. If he's from the 3 Great Saint Domains, there's no need for him to go through so much trouble. You should know that any of the 3 Great Saint Domains can easily destroy our 100 Ultimate Star Domain Alliance. Even my father wouldn't dare to go against the 3 Great Saint Domains. At this moment, young Master Xia had also calmed down and analyzed the situation carefully. This person lured us to this remote place because he doesn't want to provoke the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. He might even be afraid of the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. This person definitely doesn't have any major forces behind him. Although Prince Xia was arrogant, his knowledge far exceeded that of ordinary people. He naturally knew how terrifying the 3 sacred domains were. If Chu Fengmian was from one of the 3 sacred domains, he wouldn't have to go through so much trouble to take revenge on him. He could have just led his men to kill the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. The 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance wouldn't dare to go against the 3 sacred domains. His father, Martial Ghost Old Ancestor, was definitely a high-ranking member of the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. But in front of the 3 sacred domains, he was nothing. This person is extremely familiar with the 9 domains. I suspect that he might be a native of the 9 domains. Prince Xia's eyes flashed with coldness. Many of the natives of the 9 domains have obtained the inheritance of many ancient forces of the 9 domains. They are extremely powerful. A native of the 9 domains? The Sky Realm Elder was shocked when he heard Prince Xia's words. Then, he exclaimed in joy. If this person is really a native of the 9 domains, then this is a great opportunity. Although the sacred domains of the 9 domains have declined, many of their inheritances are even more powerful than the inheritances of the 3 sacred domains. Rumor has it that the 9 domains were the leaders of the 4 sacred domains. No wonder this person is so powerful. If he's a native of the 9 domains and has inherited the inheritance of one of the ancient sects of the 9 domains, then everything makes sense. The Sky Realm Elder spoke with a tone of incomparable surprise. End of chapter. Chapter 21:11. The reason why Prince Xia and the Celestial Realm Patriarch were terrified was that such a peerless genius could only be born in the 3 great sacred realms in the extraterritorial starry sky. When they saw Chu Fengmian's strength, they immediately thought that Chu Fengmian was from one of the 3 great sacred realms. But now that Prince Xia had calmed down, he had analyzed a lot. If Chu Fengmian wasn't from one of the 3 great sacred realms, then they didn't need to be afraid of Chu Fengmian at all. So what if a peerless genius was comparable to an immortal general? Not to mention a true immortal general, they were even more powerful than a peerless genius. Although there weren't many immortal generals in the alliance of the 100 Extremes, there were still more than a dozen of them. If they joined forces, killing Chu Fengmian wouldn't be a problem at all. Not to mention, there were also existences in the alliance of the 100 Extremes who had surpassed the immortal general realm and stepped into the profound heaven realm. I must tell father about this news. A native of the 9 domains. His strength is comparable to a peerless genius. This person must have obtained the ancient inheritance of the 9 domains. This is the only possibility. This inheritance is comparable to the ancient inheritance of the 3 great sacred realms. If I can get it, it will be easy for me to control the entire alliance of the 100 Extremes in the future. Prince Xia was extremely excited when he saw that Chu Fengmian's escape light didn't chase after him. When he returned to the alliance of the 100 Extremes, as long as he told the news to the Martial Ghost Patriarch, the Martial Ghost Patriarch would join forces with a few immortal generals to besiege Chu Fengmian. Then, Chu Fengmian would undoubtedly die, and the ancient inheritance of the 9 domains would belong to him. Good guess. It seems that you still have some brains. Your plan is good, but unfortunately, you won't have the chance to show it today. Just as Prince Xia was incomparably excited, a voice suddenly sounded, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on his excitement. The voice came from Chu Fengmian. This person has caught up? The Celestial Realm Patriarch's face was incomparably pale. Don't panic. That person is just bluffing. My arc is powered by burning immortal stones. It's not inferior to ordinary immortal generals. Even if that brat is a peerless demon-level genius, he won't be able to catch up to me. Young Master Xia said coldly. With a single breath, he took out over 100 immortal stones and burned them all. In a short period of time, Prince Xia had burned a total of 500 immortal stones. A huge amount of immortal energy poured into the arc, pushing its speed to the extreme as it flew out of the 9 domains. Really? A bluff? At this moment, Chu Fengmian's voice rang out once again. Almost at the same time, Chu Fengmian's figure suddenly appeared. Chu Fengmian walked out of the void, step by step. He seemed to be moving slowly, but Chu Fengmian's speed was faster than the speed of the arc. This was clearly a feat that could only be accomplished when one's mastery of the space Tao had reached an extremely profound level. It seemed like an ordinary step, but it was enough to cross millions of kilometers. After a few more steps, Chu Fengmian arrived beside the ark. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian made a move. He waved his hand and shrouded the ark. The ark, which was still moving in the air, suddenly stopped and fell into Chu Fengmian's palm. No matter how Prince Xia urged it, it couldn't move a single step. How is this possible? How can your light catch up to me? Prince Xia and the Celestial Realm Patriarch were in the ark. Now, they were also caught in Chu Fengmian's palm. Their faces were pale and they were incomparably panicked. Do you think I'll let you go today? Not many people can escape from me. Chu Fengmian sneered. He looked at Prince Xia with a devouring gaze. There was a hint of killing intent. No. You can't kill me. My father is the martial ghost ancestor. You dare to kill me? My father will definitely kill you. My father is a true immortal general. No matter how strong you are, you won't be my father's opponent. Seeing the killing intent in Chu Fengmian's eyes, Prince Xia's face was filled with panic as he repeatedly spoke. Humph? Your father? If the martial ghost ancestor comes, I will also kill him. I was worried that he wouldn't come. But I won't kill you now. I still have some use for you. Chu Fengmian looked at Prince Xia. Although he wanted to kill him immediately, Chu Fengmian changed his mind after thinking about it. He still had some use for Prince Xia. Life Great Seal. As soon as Chu Fengmian made a move, a seal appeared in his hand. It was the Life Great Seal. The seal fell and directly pulled Prince Xia out of the ark. However, just as Prince Xia was pulled out of the ark and was about to be suppressed by the Life Great Seal, a jade talisman suddenly appeared on Prince Xia's body. The power on the jade talisman was incomparably pure immortal energy. It was inscribed by an immortal general expert. As soon as the jade talisman appeared, it turned into a barrier and covered Lord Xia's body, blocking the power of the Great Life Seal. Oh? It's a jade talisman inscribed by an immortal general expert with his own blood? The power of this jade talisman is not inferior to an immortal general expert's incarnation. Chu Fengmian looked at the jade talisman and saw the origin of this jade talisman. This jade talisman was inscribed by an immortal general expert with his own blood. Inscribing such a jade talisman would affect the immortal general expert's strength. It would take him several years to recover. Not many people would be willing to inscribe such a jade talisman. Only Prince Xia's father, Ancestor Gui Wu, would be willing to pay such a great price to inscribe such a jade talisman to protect Prince Xia. Humph. Boy, I almost forgot that I have a jade talisman given to me by my father. This jade talisman is difficult to break even for an immortal general. You can't break it at all. Prince Xia looked at the jade talisman that enveloped his body. No matter how the Life Great Seal tugged at him, he didn't move an inch. Prince Xia's face revealed a sinister expression. Boy, you want to silence me because you want me to guess your origin and take advantage of your weakness. Since you want to kill me today, you'll be hunted down endlessly in the future. Prince Xia's face was incomparably sinister. He had already decided that even if Ancestor Gui Wu couldn't deal with Chu Fengmian, he would still spread the news of Chu Fengmian and let the experts of the major starfields hunt him down. Chapter 21:12. When the jade talisman unfolded, immortal energy shrouded Prince Xia's body. Prince Xia was like a tortoise hiding in its shell. Although he couldn't move, Chu Fengmian couldn't do anything to him. The power of the Life Seal couldn't break the jade talisman's power. It couldn't be shaken no matter how hard it tried. It's useless, kid. Even immortal generals can't break the power of this jade talisman. This jade talisman wasn't refined by my father alone. It was refined by the essence blood of several immortal generals. You can't break it even in your dreams. You're no threat to me. Young Master Xia looked at Chu Fengmian with a hint of mockery on his face. You'd better think about how to leave the 9 regions. Even if you leave the 9 regions, you'll still be hunted down endlessly. Since you dared to provoke this young master, don't think about living in peace in the future. Can't break it? Just this little jade talisman? It's easy for me to break it. Chu Fengmian's tone was filled with boundless dominance. Confidence. A black hole suddenly appeared and shrouded Prince Xia, completely devouring him. The power of the sky-devouring secret technique was fully activated by Chu Fengmian. Boom! In an instant, the heaven-devouring secret skill was fully activated. The celestial energy on the jade talisman suddenly scattered. Waves of celestial energy were mercilessly devoured by the heaven-devouring secret skill. The sky-devouring secret technique was known to have the power to devour the heavens. Even though Chu Fengmian's current strength was far from being comparable to the heaven-devouring beast's ability to devour the power of the heavens, the heaven-devouring secret technique that Chu Fengmian was able to devour countless ancient formations. This jade talisman was inscribed with a formation. It was a formation to protect young Master Xia. Even an incomparably ancient formation couldn't withstand the devouring power of the sky-devouring secret technique, let alone a formation set up by several immortal generals. A vast heaven-devouring power burst out, and the power of the jade talisman was rapidly devoured. The incomparably pure celestial force was sucked into the heaven-devouring secret skill. Immediately, the celestial force condensed into celestial stones. Chu Fengmian could now use all of the immortal force in the jade talisman. Kacha, kacha! In the space of a few breaths, the jade talisman was covered in crack. After being drained of so much immortal energy, the jade talisman was no longer able to support the spell formation to protect young Lord Xia. The power of the spell formation was now less than 10% of what it was capable of. Young Master Xia's face was as big as a pea. His face was filled with disbelief. But in the next moment, Chu Fengmian waved his hand and the protective formation around young Master Xia shattered. At the same time, the jade talisman before him completely shattered and lost its power. Prince Xia's face was extremely pale. His only support was now gone. Suppress him. Without waiting for Prince Xia to struggle, Chu Fengmian activated the life seal. Suddenly, a burst of spiritual power burst out from the life seal, enveloping Prince Xia's body and pulling him into the life seal. In the space of the life seal, waves of spiritual power turned into chains and firmly suppressed Prince Xia's body. Prince Xia couldn't struggle and was firmly nailed to the ground. Everything on you belongs to me. Chu Fengmian glanced at Prince Xia and suddenly grabbed him. Several empty rings flew out from Prince Xia's body. These empty rings all had Prince Xia's imprint. Clearly, they were his empty rings. However, the moment these empty rings flew into Chu Fengmian's palm, Chu Fengmian suppressed them with his dragon's might. The imprint on these empty rings that belonged to Prince Xia was completely removed. From now on, these empty rings belonged to Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian injected spiritual power into the empty rings and opened them. At a glance, he saw a box in the deepest part of the empty rings. Inside the box, there were many blue immortal stones. At a glance, there were at least 2,000 to 3,000 of them. In addition to these immortal stones, there were many sacred elixirs, materials, heavenly wonders, and so on. Many of these things were difficult for heavenly realm experts to obtain. Chu Fengmian even found an immortal artifact. It was an immortal armor. Among immortal artifacts, the value of an immortal armor was several times higher than an immortal weapon. If it was difficult for ordinary immortal realm experts, immortal soldiers, and demon deities to obtain an immortal weapon, then this immortal armor was difficult to obtain even for immortal generals. Chu Fengmian had fought against Ocean Monarch before, but he didn't have an immortal armor. Now, there was actually an immortal armor in Prince Xia's empty ring. However, when Chu Fengmian took a closer look, he found that the immortal armor was full of cracks and scars. It seemed that it had suffered a great impact and a part of it was broken. Although it was still intact, it had lost its power. It was no wonder that this immortal armor was placed in Prince Xia's empty ring. However, even a damaged immortal armor was priceless. This immortal armor was still intact. Although it was full of cracks, it could still be repaired. Once it was repaired, it would be a real immortal armor. Chu Fengmian looked at it and felt that there was still a possibility of repairing it. Although Chu Fengmian's attainments in the Tao of weapon refinement were not as good as those of a true weapon refinement grandmaster, he was still able to repair such an immortal armor. Chu Fengmian transferred the immortal armor, immortal stones, and all the treasures in Prince Xia's empty ring into his own empty ring. Prince Xia could clearly see all of this from within the Life Great Seal. His heart was bleeding. All the treasures he had accumulated were now in Chu Fengmian's hands. They had all become Chu Fengmian's wedding dress. Chu Fengmian put away the Life Great Seal. Now that Prince Xia had entered the Life Great Seal, Chu Fengmian could monitor Prince Xia's situation at any time with a single thought. He wasn't worried that Prince Xia could escape. The only thing left in Chu Fengmian's empty ring was the celestial being Old Man. Although this old man was an immortal martialist, he was a patriarch of the 100 Ultimate Star Regions Alliance and a person with a transcendent status. However, when he saw Chu Fengmian's gaze on him, his face was full of fear. Seeing Prince Xia being suppressed by Chu Fengmian, he didn't have the courage to fight back. He stood there, trembling all over. When he saw Chu Fengmian looking at him, he hurriedly said, "Don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I'm willing to submit. Please don't kill me." End of chapter. Chapter 21:13. The old man trembled as he looked at Chu Fengmian. "I'm willing to submit." In front of Chu Fengmian, Ancestor Ouyang was crushed to death like an ant by Chu Fengmian. The old man's strength was on par with old Ancestor Ouyang. He had no chance to resist or escape from Chu Fengmian's hands. Now, he was begging for mercy. "Oh? You're willing to submit to me?" Chu Fengmian was prepared to kill the old man, but since the old man was willing to submit, Chu Fengmian couldn't spare his life. Now that Chu Fengmian had captured Prince Xia, it meant that he had shed all pretenses with Martial Ghost Old Ancestor. Martial Ghost Old Ancestor was one of the higher-ups of the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. In the future, the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance might take action against Chu Fengmian. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. Chu Fengmian wanted to know the true strength of the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. The old man was an old ancestor of the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. He could be used as a chess piece to deal with Martial Ghost Old Ancestor. "You want to submit? Kneel down and open your Tao heart." Chu Fengmian looked coldly at the old man and said, "Don't try to play any tricks. You only have one chance to submit to me. If you dare to resist, you'll die." Chu Fengmian didn't hide the killing intent in his tone. If the old man was sincere in submitting, Chu Fengmian could spare his life. However, if the old man wanted to play any tricks, he would die without a doubt. I dare not. I'm willing to submit." The old man was scared out of his wits by Chu Fengmian. When he heard Chu Fengmian's words, he said with a trembling voice. He knelt down in front of Chu Fengmian. His face was incomparably ugly, but he still chose to open his Tao heart. Once a restriction was placed in his Tao heart, the old man's life would be completely under Chu Fengmian's control. As long as Chu Fengmian was willing to activate the restriction, it would be enough to make the old man suffer from qi deviation and die. The higher the cultivation level of an expert, the stronger the inner demon. Therefore, a strong Tao heart was extremely important. It could suppress the inner demon, But once the Tao heart was in chaos, the inner demon would definitely act up. At that time, only qi deviation and death would await the expert. However, the old man knew that he no longer had a second choice. If he did not want to die today, the only path left for him was to submit. The old man knelt before Chu Fengmian and opened his Tao heart. Seeing this, Chu Fengmian gathered a strand of spiritual energy in his palm. This strand of spiritual energy gradually condensed into a seal and a rune before entering the old man's Tao heart. Heavenly Death Seal. Once he was struck with the Heavenly Death Seal, the old man would not even be able to commit suicide. He would be completely under Chu Fengmian's control. However, just in case, Chu Fengmian also quietly condensed a strand of heaven-devouring power. It turned into a sky-devouring seed and entered the old man's Tao heart. This sky-devouring seed was the condensation of incomparably pure heaven-devouring power. As long as Chu Fengmian activated it, it could directly drain the old man's strength and turn him into a dried corpse. When this kind of sky-devouring seed was directly inserted into the Tao heart, even an immortal general or even an immortal marquis would not be able to save him. After doing all this, Chu Fengmian's expression relaxed. The old man in front of him had completely surrendered and fallen into Chu Fengmian's control. The old man slowly stood up from the ground. His face was incomparably pale, and he did not look like a celestial realm warrior at all. He also knew that a restriction had been planted in his Tao heart. From now on, he would become Chu Fengmian's slave without any dignity. Even if Chu Fengmian ordered him to throw his life away, he could only do it obediently. As long as you serve me well, I won't let you throw your life away. On the contrary, I will enhance your strength. Do you understand? Chu Fengmian also saw through the old man's thoughts and said indifferently, "Yes, master." The old man knelt down and replied in an incomparably respectful tone. He also knew his identity. If he served Chu Fengmian obediently now, he would still have a chance to live. If he dared to disobey Chu Fengmian, he would be courting death. He chose to submit to Chu Fengmian because he did not want to die. Naturally, he would not resist now. Moreover, the heavenly death seal had been engraved in the old man's Tao heart. Although it could not deal with warriors and demon immortals of lower realms, it could still affect the old man's Tao heart. However, it could also influence the old man at all times, causing him to have an instinctive fear of Chu Fengmian. "Come with me first. This is not a place to stay for long." After subduing the old man, Chu Fengmian directly said to him. He waved his hand and a burst of spatial power suddenly burst out, turning into a spatial tunnel. Chu Fengmian and the old man stepped into it and disappeared above the North Sea. Almost at the same time, in the distant 100 Extremes Star Domain Alliance, in the deepest void of the palace, an old man was sitting in an independent space. Suddenly, the old man's eyes opened abruptly, revealing an expression of disbelief and boundless killing intent. This old man was Martial Ghost Ancestor. The jade talisman on Prince Xia's body was refined with his blood essence. The moment the jade talisman was shattered, he immediately felt it. "Damn it! Who is it? Who dares to deal with my son?" He was even forced to use his life jade talisman. Martial Ghost Ancestor's face was filled with boundless anger. An immortal general expert suddenly became angry, and his boundless killing intent was clearly felt by countless celestial realm ancestors in the deep void of the 100 Extremes Star Domain Alliance. "What's going on? Martial Ghost Ancestor? Why is he so angry?" A figure suddenly stepped into this space. It was the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor who was talking to the Martial Ghost Old Ancestor. He also felt the anger of the Martial Ghost Old Ancestor, so he rushed over and said with a surprised face, "For existences at their level, ordinary things were not worth getting angry over." But now, Martial Ghost Ancestor's anger was soaring to the sky, as if he was going to destroy everything. Tianxing Jiandi couldn't help but frown. The life jade talisman I left for Jiuyu has been broken, Martial Ghost Ancestor said in an extremely cold tone when he saw Tianxing Jiandi coming over. The life jade talisman has been broken? Tianxing Jiandi was extremely shocked when he heard Martial Ghost Ancestor's words. End of chapter. Chapter 21:14. It could be said that all the patriarchs of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance knew how much Patriarch Jiuyu doted on his only son, Prince Xia. In particular, in order to protect Prince Xia, Patriarch Jiuyu did not hesitate to consume his blood to refine a life jade talisman to protect Prince Xia. While refining the life jade talisman, Patriarch Jiuyu sought out many immortal generals of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance and jointly engraved a formation on the talisman. Tianxing Jiandi also participated in the refining of the life jade talisman. But now that the life jade talisman had been broken, it meant that Prince Xia was in danger and might even die on the spot. Who did it? That life jade talisman can't be broken unless it's done by an immortal general expert. But why would an immortal general expert target him? The heavenly sacred sword frowned as well. Although Prince Xia was arrogant, Prince Xia was not a reckless person. His arrogance was only toward the ordinary disciples of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance. If he encountered an immortal general expert, Prince Xia would certainly be incomparably respectful and would not take the initiative to provoke them. Moreover, Prince Xia was only a half-step celestial being expert. There was no reason for an immortal general expert to kill him. Although there were hundreds and thousands of experts gathered in the 9 domains, an immortal general expert was not that easy to encounter. Could it be that the matter of that small world has been exposed? Tianxing Jiandi pondered and felt that this was the only possibility. Prince Xia's purpose in going to the 9 domains this time was to explore the small world that the two of them had discovered. An undiscovered small world was enough to attract the attention of an immortal general expert. In order to snatch the map, it was indeed possible that an immortal general expert would intercept and kill Prince Xia. Impossible. Other than the two of us, no one else knows about that small world. Old Ancestor Jiuyu shook his head. Furthermore, Jiuyu isn't dead yet. I can sense that he's still alive. I left a restriction on his body. He's not dead yet. However, I can feel that he has already been suppressed by someone. As the martial ghost Old Ancestor spoke, his tone was filled with boundless killing intent. No matter who it is, I will kill whoever dares to deal with my son. I will make sure that he dies without a burial ground. Jiuyu, let's work together to calculate who did it. Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor's eyes flickered. A surge of immortal energy condensed in his palm as he performed a divination technique. A water screen appeared in front of him. The scene of the North Sea was displayed on the water screen. However, the scene displayed on the water screen was incomparably blurry. Apart from barely being able to see the Northern Sea, nothing else could be seen. You can't divine it. When the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor saw this result, he frowned. With his strength, even if he were to calculate the strength of an immortal general expert, he would still be able to deduce some clues. He would be able to deduce who the attacker was. But now, he could only divine the location of the North Sea. This proved that young Master Xia was in the North Sea and was being suppressed by someone. But as for who was the culprit, it was a complete mess. No matter how hard he tried, he could not divine anything. I'll help you. Old Ancestor Jiuyu made a move at the same time. He condensed his immortal power and sent it into the water screen. Together with Tianxing Jiandi, they worked together to divine what had happened to Prince Xia. However, even with the two of them working together, only the scene of the North Sea became clearer in the water screen. As for who the culprit was, they still couldn't see clearly. They could only vaguely see a silhouette suppressing young Master Xia. However, they could not deduce what this silhouette looked like. What the hell is going on? Could the culprit be a profound heaven realm immortal marquis? Tianxing Jiandi couldn't help but frown when the two of them couldn't divine it. With the two of them working together, they should be able to divine the identity of any immortal general. Even if they couldn't divine the appearance of the person who had suppressed young Master Xia, they should still be able to divine some clues. Using these clues, they would be able to find out who the culprit was. But now, even with the two of them working together, they were only able to divine a chaotic area. Unless the person who had suppressed young Master Xia was a profound heaven realm expert who was even stronger than them, it would only be possible for them to do so. Impossible. I feel that the person suppressing Jiuyu is definitely not that strong. He just used some means to interfere with the space so that we can't divine his appearance. Old Ancestor Gui Wu shook his head and suddenly stood up. Let's go to the 9 regions. The 9 regions? What if we can't find this person? Tianxing Jiandi asked. Humph, that person thinks he's smart, but he doesn't know that I left a seal on Jiuyu's body. Although Jiuyu is now being suppressed by this person, I can still track him down. Old Ancestor Gui Wu said with a ferocious face. Let's go. I feel that this person's strength is definitely not strong. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to use so many means to hide his identity. Even if he's an immortal general, I'll kill him for daring to deal with my son. Old Ancestor Gui Wu shouted angrily. His body moved, and he left the void and flew in the direction of the 9 regions. Tianxing Jiandi followed closely behind. The 2 immortal generals also flew toward the 9 regions. In the depths of the northern sea of the 9 regions, Chu Feng was sleeping. He had opened up a space and was sitting on a throne. Below him was Sir Xia. Now all of Prince Xia's strength had been sealed. He was no different from an ordinary person and had no ability to resist at all. He just knelt in front of Chu Fengmian. The celestial realm old man who was subdued by Chu Fengmian was beside him, guarding Prince Xia. They can't calculate my appearance. They should be coming to the 9 regions now. Chu Fengmian, who was sitting on the throne, muttered to himself. Of course, he could clearly feel that just now, 2 immortal generals had suddenly joined forces to calculate Chu Fengmian's whereabouts. There was no need to think. Chu Fengmian knew that these 2 people must be Old Ancestor Gui Wu and Tianxing Jiandi. The jade talisman of life contained Old Ancestor Gui Wu's blood. The moment the jade talisman was broken, Old Ancestor Gui Wu could clearly feel it. Therefore, Old Ancestor Gui Wu most likely already knew that Prince Xia was being suppressed by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian had long expected that Old Ancestor Gui Wu would devour the jade talisman of life as soon as he sensed that it was broken. Old Ancestor Gui Wu came to calculate who did it, so he was already prepared. Chapter 21:15. With Chu Fengmian's current strength, even immortal generals would have a hard time detecting his identity if he tried his best to conceal his presence. Moreover, Chu Fengmian had already passed a heaven-defying tribulation and merged with Genesis Chi. He had already become a variant of heaven and earth, a unique existence in this world. If the 2 immortal generals joined forces, they would have a chance of detecting Chu Fengmian's presence. But now that Chu Fengmian had become a variant of heaven and earth, even 20 immortal generals wouldn't be able to detect his presence, let alone 2. Although Chu Fengmian said that he didn't care about exposing his identity, Martial Ghost Old Ancestor and Tianxing Jiandi were 2 immortal generals. Chu Fengmian had to be careful when dealing with them. Now that the 2 were out in the open and Chu Fengmian was in the dark, Chu Fengmian had a chance to come up with a plan to deal with them. Chu Fengmian had already thought of some plans beforehand. That was why he had deliberately spared young Master Xia's life. Young Master Xia was also an extremely important part of the plan. What's your name and identity? Chu Fengmian looked at the Celestial Realm Elder and asked. Master, my name is Mo Fu. People call me Old Ancestor Li Bei. I came from Blue Wave Starfield and was the original owner of the Blue Wave Starfield. Later, I came to the 9 regions and joined the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance. I'm a 3rd-level elder. The elder, Old Ancestor Li Bei, answered respectfully. 3rd-level elder? Chu Fengmian was a little surprised to hear this title. There are different levels of elders in the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance? Chu Fengmian only knew that all the demon immortals who had stepped into the celestial realm were called elders in the 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance, but he didn't expect there to be different levels of elders. Yes, the old ancestors of the 100 Extremes Star Domain Alliance are divided into 1st level, 2nd level, and 3rd level. 1st level is the highest. Normally, only immortal generals are qualified to be 1st level old ancestors. The old ancestor Gui Wu and Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor that Master is going against are both 1st level old ancestors. As for the 2nd level old ancestor, only immortal warriors are qualified to hold that position. The immortal realm martial artists and demon gods are called 3rd-grade great ancestors. Generally speaking, only 1st-grade great ancestors are considered as the real higher-ups in the alliance of the 100 Extremes Star regions. They are qualified to make decisions about the various matters of the alliance of the 100 Extremes Star regions. 2nd-grade great ancestors and 3rd-grade great ancestors do not have this qualification. Old Ancestor Heartbreak explained in detail. The 9 levels of immortals had completely different statuses. For example, immortals who had just ascended to immortality could only be called immortals. Immortals who were above them were called aristocrats. Celestial generals, on the other hand, were considered minor figures among the celestial realm. Above them were immortal marquis and immortal kings. They were all overlords. As for the highest level of immortal emperors, they were the immortal emperors. They were high above the masses and had a very high status. In some small forces, the hierarchy might not be so obvious. However, there were more than 100 celestial realm martial artists and demon gods in the alliance of the 100 Extremes Star regions. For example, Old Ancestor Heartbreak was only a 3rd-grade great ancestor. He belonged to the lowest group of old ancestors in the alliance of the 100 Extremes Star regions. Old Ancestor Martial Ghost was a 1st-grade great ancestor from Tianxing Jiandi. He belonged to the real higher-ups in the alliance of the 100 Extremes Star regions. Even among the countless celestial realm martial artists and demon gods, he had a very high status. Are there any experts who are comparable to the profound heaven realm in the alliance of the 100 Extremes Star regions? Chu Fengmian asked the most important question. Given Chu Fengmian's current strength, he wouldn't be afraid even if he had to fight against an immortal general expert. Even if he couldn't kill an immortal general expert with his current strength, he could still escape unscathed. However, an expert in the profound heaven realm was a completely different existence. Even a 1st-grade immortal marquis expert was many times more terrifying than an immortal warrior. Chu Fengmian had once sensed the aura of an immortal marquis expert in the dark whale hidden treasure. Although it was just an aura, it still left a deep impression on Chu Fengmian. It was absolutely different from an immortal warrior. Now that Chu Fengmian had captured Prince Xia and killed Old Ancestor Ouyang, it was not a big deal for the alliance of the 100 Extremes Star regions. Although Prince Xia's father was Old Ancestor Martial Ghost, he was only a half-step celestial realm martial artist. Although Old Ancestor Martial Ghost would be furious, the higher-ups of the alliance of the 100 Extremes Star regions would not care about it. On the other hand, Old Ancestor Ouyang was only a 3rd-grade Old Ancestor. His status was extremely low among the Old Ancestors of the 100 Extremes Star regions alliance. His death was not a big deal. However, Old Ancestor Martial Ghost and Tianxing Jiandi were both immortal warriors, 1st-grade Old Ancestors of the 100 Extremes Star regions alliance. They had a high status and were the true higher-ups of the Alliance of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance. After killing the two of them, the Alliance of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance might not let the matter rest. Although it was just a guess, Chu Fengmian had to be vigilant. I don't know about profound Heaven Realm experts. Even if such experts exist, only first-grade Old Ancestors are qualified to come in contact with them. Old Ancestor Li Shige shook his head, indicating that he did not know. Chu Fengmian asked Old Ancestor Li Shige more about the Alliance of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance. With his status, although he did not know some key secrets, he still knew most of the things. Chu Fengmian gradually understood the situation of the Alliance of the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance. After asking all these questions, Chu Fengmian sat on the throne and suddenly opened the spatial ring of the small world. Chu Fengmian opened Prince Xia's spatial ring and saw an ancient map at a glance. He took it out, placed it in his palm, and studied it carefully. The ancient map emitted a pure immortal energy that Chu Fengmian noticed at first glance. Is this the map of the small world? Chu Fengmian did not know what kind of immortal beast was used to inscribe this ancient map. He could clearly sense a wisp of immortal energy on it, which proved that this ancient map was made from the skin of an immortal beast that was at least at the immortal warrior realm. An ancient map inscribed on the skin of an immortal beast would remain intact for tens of millions of years. Chu Fengmian could not deduce the origin of this ancient map, but the coordinates of the void were clearly recorded on it. These coordinates should be the location of the entrance to the small world. There were countless small worlds around the 9 regions, and each of them had an entrance. However, these entrances could appear in the 9 regions or be hidden in the void. It was said that there were thousands of small worlds around the 9 regions. End of chapter. Chapter 21:16. This was only the recorded number. In fact, the number of small worlds far exceeded this number. For example, even if some small worlds were discovered, if they were not publicized, no one would know about it. For example, when the 5 great sects came to the 9 realms, they discovered a small world and took it for themselves, making it their headquarters. Most of the entrances to the small worlds around the 9 regions were hidden in the depths of the void. They were constantly moving along with the void turbulence, so it was almost impossible to find them. It was a great opportunity to find such a small world. Martial Ghost Ancestor and Tianxing Jiendi were lucky to find such a small world when they came to the 9 regions. The ancient map in Chu Fengmian's hand was just a fragment. Only the spatial coordinates of the small world's entrance were recorded on it. There were more places that should have been torn off and were still in the hands of Martial Ghost Ancestor. In this case, Chu Fengmian knew nothing about the small world. He didn't even know its origin. In any small world, there could be hidden dangers. Some small worlds that were famous for their fierceness were even more famous than the few perilous places. Even if a celestial realm expert entered those small worlds, there was no chance of survival. However, Chu Fengmian was still very confident in his life-saving means. Since he had obtained the fragment of the map, Chu Fengmian naturally had to go to this small world. However, before that, he had to deal with Martial Ghost Ancestor and Tianxing Jiendi first. Especially the Supreme Sword Qi in Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor's hand, there were hundreds and thousands of them. Chu Fengmian already had 1,800 Supreme Sword Qi in his hand. If Chu Fengmian could obtain this portion of Supreme Sword Qi from Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor, he would be able to gather all 3,000 Supreme Sword Qi. At that time, the power of the Supreme Sword Qi would increase by countless folds. It might even be stronger than an immortal weapon. At that time, with the help of the Supreme Sword Qi, Chu Fengmian would have more capital to explore that small world. The Martial Ghost Old Ancestor and the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor were both peak Celestial Realm and Immortal General Realm experts. They didn't need to use the arc to come to the 9 domains from the alliance of the 100 extremes star regions. They could cross the starry sky with their physical bodies and reach the 9 domains in 6 hours. During these 6 hours, Chu Fengmian had to make some arrangements to deal with Martial Ghost Ancestor and Tianxing Jiandi. The two of them were still unaware of Chu Fengmian's identity. This was the most advantageous point for Chu Fengmian. Given Chu Fengmian's current strength, even if he went all out, he was only comparable to an immortal general expert. If it was a one-on-one battle, Chu Fengmian was confident that he could defeat them. But now, Martial Ghost Ancestor and Tianxing Jiandi must have joined forces. Chu Fengmian wasn't completely confident in dealing with two immortal generals. He also needed to make some arrangements. Go! Chu Fengmian waved his hand and took Patriarch Li Si into the Life Seal. Then, Chu Fengmian left the void alone and returned to the North Sea. Chu Fengmian returned to the North Sea and turned into a beam of light, flying towards the western region. Chu Fengmian's destination was the returning ruins sky. Following the upheaval of the 9 domains, the returning ruins sky had been completely opened. Any martial artist or demon god could enter it. Countless treasures had also emerged, attracting countless experts to fight for them. The last time Chu Fengmian went to the returning ruins sky, he had encountered the opening of the Buddhist temple in the Pure Land and had gained a lot. However, this time, Chu Fengmian didn't go to the returning ruins sky for the treasures, but to deal with Martial Ghost Ancestor and Tianxing Jiandi. Chu Fengmian kept himself hidden all the way to the Sinkhole Heavens. Even Celestial Realm elites could not see through Chu Fengmian's figure. Chu Fengmian arrived at the Sinkhole Heavens without a hitch. Unlike the martial artists and demon gods who came from the extraterritorial starry sky, Chu Fengmian was very familiar with the returning ruins sky. Chu Fengmian entered the returning ruins sky and flew in the direction of chaos. Previously, Chu Fengmian had obtained the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace and could enter and exit the returning ruins sky at any time. He had also entered the returning ruins sky several times to search for treasures and found some supreme sword chi, as well as many treasures and relics. However, those treasures and relics were dangerous. At that time, Chu Fengmian wasn't strong enough and naturally didn't dare to step into them. Now, the upheaval of the 9 domains had attracted countless experts from the extraterritorial starry sky. The returning ruins sky was a famous treasure land in the 9 domains and naturally attracted countless experts to search for treasures. Chu Fengmian had found many treasures, but they had all been taken away. This made Chu Fengmian feel a little regretful. While searching for treasures and supreme sword chi in the returning ruins sky, Chu Fengmian also discovered many strange places in the returning ruins sky. The ruins of End Sky was once an extremely prosperous region of the 9 regions. However, for some unknown reason, the space there underwent a drastic change. It fell into the void and became a unique world. In addition to the ruins of the ancient sects of the 9 regions, there were also some unique regions due to the drastic change in space. Chu Fengmian's figure shuttled back and forth in the returning ruins sky until he reached the edge of the returning ruins sky and arrived at a piece of chaos. Chu Fengmian was in the chaos. At a glance, everything was a piece of chaos. It was gray and hazy and he couldn't see anything. In this place, even his spiritual consciousness couldn't be used. It was a unique place of chaos. It was said that the beginning of the world was the absolute beginning. At that time, there was nothing, not even chaos. It was the beginning of the primordial era. There were no living creatures, not even the most ancient innate divine beasts were born. The absolute beginning era didn't take into account how long it had been. It was unknown how long it had been since the absolute beginning era entered the chaotic era. At that time, the world was a piece of chaos that contained chaotic chi. In that era, a part of the absolute beginning chi that was left behind gave birth to countless living creatures, such as innate divine beasts, Jianmu, 10 heavenly demons, and others. They were all creatures that were born from the absolute beginning Qi. The endless chaotic Qi also turned into all things in the heavens. It turned into stars, continents, and starry regions. Almost all of the chaotic Qi disappeared and turned into living creatures. However, there was still some chaotic Qi that didn't completely dissipate due to various coincidences. This chaotic Qi was an incomparably precious thing. Even celestial realm experts would fight for it. It could be used to practice martial skills, break through realms, and so on. It had almost endless magical uses. Chapter 21:17. Back then, the Mad Dragon Emperor had tried to force his way through the heaven-defying tribulation, but failed in the end and was injured by the tribulation instead. It was because of this chaos Qi that the Mad Dragon Emperor was able to suppress his injuries. Otherwise, the Mad Dragon Emperor would have died long ago. The primal chaos Qi had almost endless magical uses. Even a gourd of primal chaos Qi was priceless. But now, in the primal chaos where Chu Fengmian was, he could feel traces of primal chaos Qi in the surrounding spiritual energy. Among the cultivators of the 9 territories, this place was called the Primal Chaos Ruins because it contained traces of primal chaos Qi. It could be said to be an out-and-out treasure land. But no cultivator was willing to come here to cultivate. They didn't even dare to set foot here. Because the Primal Chaos Ruins wasn't a treasure land at all. Instead, it was a dangerous place. Even Emperor Realm cultivators would die if they stepped into it. The slightest carelessness could lead to death on the spot. That was because the spiritual energy in the Primal Chaos Ruins was extremely heterogeneous. In addition to the Primal Chaos Qi, it also contained many poisonous gases and miasma from the primordial era. Although there was a trace of Primal Chaos Qi, it was very likely that one would be poisoned to death if they devoured the spiritual energy here. It was dangerous to come to the Primal Chaos Ruins unless one didn't breathe in any of the spiritual energy here. Therefore, even though they knew that the Primal Chaos Ruins was full of Primal Chaos Qi, no cultivator or demon god was willing to come and devour it. Although the Primal Chaos Qi was good, one's life was more important. The poisonous gases and miasma came from the primordial era. In this era there was almost no cure. Therefore, the Primal Chaos Ruins was a quiet place in the bustling End Ruins heaven. Except for Chu Fengmian, no one was willing to step into this place. In the Primal Chaos Ruins, there were no treasures or ruins except for the endless Primal Chaos Qi. Therefore, even if there were some cultivators and demon gods who were curious about this place, they would leave after a simple exploration. After the news of the Primal Chaos Ruins spread, no one was willing to set foot in it. Chu Fengmian was an anomaly to be able to come to the Primal Chaos Ruins. Firstly, Chu Fengmian had the divine pulse, so he could directly absorb the spiritual energy in the earth vein. He didn't need to breathe in the Primal Chaos Ruins. Therefore, the poison and miasma in the chaos spiritual energy wouldn't affect Chu Fengmian. Secondly, Chu Fengmian also knew the heaven-devouring secret technique. The heaven-devouring secret technique had the power to devour everything. Any poisonous gas or miasma that was devoured by it would be completely neutralized. Therefore, a huge vortex had appeared above Chu Fengmian's head and was frantically devouring the chaotic spiritual energy in the Primal Chaos Ruins. All of the miasma and poison gas would be refined by this vortex and turned into pure spirit energy that would be absorbed into Chu Fengmian's body. However, Chu Fengmian wasn't interested in this spiritual energy. What he needed was the Primal Chaos Qi. The vortex formed by the heaven-devouring secret technique revolved above Chu Fengmian's head, devouring the Primal Chaos Qi in the Primal Chaos Ruins. The Primal Chaos Qi had endless magical uses. Although it wasn't as good as the Genesis Qi, it was still a rare and precious item. Chu Fengmian wouldn't waste this opportunity to devour the Primal Chaos Qi. The primal chaos qi in the primal chaos ruins was almost endless. It would take Chu Fengmian dozens of years to completely devour the primal chaos qi using the heaven-devouring secret technique. Chu Fengmian's devouring wouldn't attract the attention of others. No one would have thought that there would be someone devouring the primal chaos qi in the primal chaos ruins. Sword out. While devouring the primal chaos qi, Chu Fengmian immediately activated his spiritual energy. Suddenly, sword shadows emerged in front of him. These sword shadows eventually turned into spiritual swords. There were a total of 1,800 spiritual swords. They were the 1,800 supreme sword qi in Chu Fengmian's hand. The moment these 1,800 supreme sword qi were summoned by Chu Fengmian, they suddenly flew into the depths of the primal chaos ruins and hid there. These 1,800 supreme sword qi were perfectly hidden in the primal chaos ruins. It was impossible to see them. The primal chaos ruins was originally a piece of primal chaos, so the supreme sword qi's sword intent would be concealed. However, this was only for outsiders. For martial artists who also possessed supreme sword qi, they could clearly sense the supreme sword qi hidden in the primal chaos ruins as long as they were close to the ruins of End. Chu Fengmian planned to lure martial ghost ancestor and Tianxing Jiendi into the primal chaos ruins. Martial ghost ancestor and Tianxing Jiendi were two immortal generals. Chu Fengmian knew that these two were definitely not easy to deal with. Moreover, this was his only chance to deal with them. Only this time, the enemy was in the open while Chu Fengmian was in the dark. This was the best opportunity for him. If he failed this time, it would be 10 times more difficult to deal with these two the next time. Chu Fengmian was also aware of this point, so this time, he was prepared to use the Supreme Sword Qi as bait to lure Martial Ghost Ancestor and Tianxing Jiendi over. To deal with the two of them, Chu Fengmian was not worried that Tianxing Jiendi would not come. As a sword cultivator, Tianxing Jiendi was absolutely clear about the value of the Supreme Sword Qi. Furthermore, there were a total of 1,800 Supreme Sword Qis being devoured here. With so many Supreme Sword Qis, even if the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor sensed danger, he would still come. Moreover, Chu Fengmian had chosen the Primal Chaos Ruins in the Ruins of End. The Ruins of End was a famous treasure land in the 9 domains, where countless treasures had appeared. The place where Chu Fengmian first obtained the Supreme Sword Qi was also in the Ruins of End. It was very likely that the Supreme Sword Qi would appear in the Ruins of End. Chu Fengmian had calculated everything. Now that he had arranged everything, he just had to wait for Martial Ghost Ancestor and Tianxing Jiendi to arrive. These 1,800 Supreme Sword Qi were now hidden in the Ruins of End. They were drifting around as if they were ownerless objects. Chu Fengmian had been devouring the Primal Chaos Spiritual Qi in the Ruins of End for 6 hours. After 6 hours, Chu Fengmian opened his eyes. His figure turned into a streak of light that left the Ruins of End with a whoosh and arrived in the Ruins of End. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian moved his palm and pulled Prince Xia out of the life mark. After a moment, Chu Fengmian suppressed Prince Xia back into the life mark. However, Chu Fengmian believed that Martial Ghost Ancestor could already sense Prince Xia's aura. Chapter 21:18. For an immortal general expert, a single breath was enough for him to detect Prince Xia's aura. Chu Fengmian deliberately didn't kill Prince Xia because he wanted to use Prince Xia to lure Martial Ghost Patriarch over. After doing all this, Chu Fengmian returned to the chaotic ruins, concealed himself, and waited. In the sky above the 9 zones, the two figures easily crossed the 9 heavenly flames with their physical bodies and descended into the 9 regions. One of them didn't hide his power at all. His violent aura made the martial artists and Yao gods in the 9 zones retreat, not daring to approach him. These two figures were the 2 immortal generals who had rushed over from the 100 Territories Alliance. They were Martial Ghost Patriarch and Tianxing Jiendi. They had just crossed the starry sky and the ninefold heavenly flames to enter the 9 zones when Martial Ghost Patriarch suddenly trembled and stopped in midair. It's Jiuyu's aura. Although it was only for a moment, Martial Ghost Patriarch had sensed Prince Ya's aura the moment he arrived in the 9 zones. The Martial Ghost Progenitor came to a stop. He gathered a stream of immortal force in his palm and made a grabbing motion. The immortal force flew into the air and pointed in a certain direction. Sinkhole Sky? Jiuyu is in Sinkhole Sky? Why would he go there? Martial Ghost Patriarch was no stranger to Sinkhole Sky, as it was a famous treasure land in the 9 zones. He had been there before to search for treasures. Many experts from the extraterritorial starry sky chose to go to Sinkhole Sky to search for treasures. Sinkhole Sky contained countless treasures and had become one of the most dangerous places in the 9 zones. This danger didn't refer to the original danger of Sinkhole Sky. Although there were ruins of countless sects in Sinkhole Sky, these sects had fallen for at least tens of thousands of years. The power of the restrictions and formations they left behind was less than 1/10 of its original power, so it wasn't considered dangerous. The battle between the martial artists and Yao gods from the extraterritorial starry sky was the greatest danger. Even if one was lucky enough to obtain treasures, they could still be targeted by others. Killing people and exchanging goods was something that happened every day. Prince Xia shouldn't have gone to such a dangerous place. It's most likely the person who suppressed Xia Zhu is now hiding in the Sinkhole Sky. Tianxing Jiandi said. This time around, this person deliberately revealed his aura. Perhaps he's deliberately trying to lure us over. Tianxing Jiandi said cautiously. If Prince Xia was killed, they wouldn't suspect anything. But now, Prince Xia was not dead, but was captured alive. Obviously, there was a purpose behind capturing Prince Xia. The biggest possibility was that they were here for the 2 of them. Purposely baiting? I want to see who is so audacious. How dare you attack us? Let's go and take a look at Sinkhole Heaven. Patriarch Gui Wu's face twisted. He was no longer as calm as before after being captured alone. He turned into a beam of light and flew in the direction of Sinkhole Heaven. Tianxing Jiandi followed closely behind. The 2 beams of light quickly traversed the 9 zones and arrived at Sinkhole Heaven. Patriarch Gui Wu could still detect a little bit of Prince Xia's aura when they were heading towards Sinkhole Heaven. But when they arrived, the aura completely disappeared. What's going on? Why is the aura completely gone? After arriving at the Sinkhole Sky, Patriarch Martial Gui frowned. Young Master Xia's aura had suddenly disappeared without a trace. Patriarch Martial Gui probed again, but found nothing. It was as if Prince Xia wasn't in Sinkhole Heaven at all. It was at this point that Patriarch Martial Ghost suddenly took out a spell formation diagram. It flew out and countless images appeared on it. Patriarch Martial Ghost then dripped a drop of his blood essence into the diagram, causing the image of the ruins of End Heaven to appear. Jiuyu is still in Sinkhole Heaven, but the brat who suppressed Jiuyu must have sensed our aura and hid before we arrived. Moreover, after coming to Sinkhole Sky, I can feel that this person's strength is definitely not strong. He can't be an immortal general. He must have used some unknown method to break the Life Jade Talisman. His original strength is definitely not that strong. Patriarch Gui Wu spoke with a sinister expression as he looked at the image that appeared in the array diagram. Nobody dares to attack my son? He's courting death. The ghostly ancestor seemed to have figured out some of Chu Fengmian's background. The fear in his heart dissipated and was replaced by endless killing intent. He was originally afraid that Chu Fengmian might be an immortal general or even a profound heaven immortal marquis. However, this time, he sensed that Chu Fengmian was definitely not an immortal general. He was at most an immortal realm martial artist. After discovering all this, Patriarch Gui Wu let go of the fear in his heart. An immortal realm cultivator was just a nobody in his eyes. It wouldn't be a problem for him to kill them if he wanted to. After probing Chu Fengmian's background, Patriarch Gui Wu condensed his immortal energy and poured it into the array diagram to find Chu Fengmian's location. On the other side, not far away in the chaotic ruins, Chu Fengmian's face was filled with nervousness. His aura had almost completely disappeared. He was trying his best to conceal his aura. Chu Fengmian could sense that an invisible force was shrouding the sky above Chu Fengmian, probing his aura. I almost failed miserably. I didn't expect Patriarch Gui Wu to have such an immortal weapon. This array diagram actually has the ability to detect aura? After a full 5 minutes, the force gradually dissipated. Chu Fengmian heaved a sigh of relief. Chu Fengmian also didn't expect Patriarch Gui Wu to have an array diagram that could detect aura. This array diagram was very similar to the God Spying Mirror that Chu Fengmian had once obtained. However, it was more powerful than the God Spying Mirror. It was an immortal weapon. Patriarch Gui Wu didn't notice Chu Fengmian at first. Instead, he used his bloodline to detect Prince Xia's aura. After all, Prince Xia was his only son and was connected to him by blood. However, he did not expect that the formation diagram would be able to detect a strand of Chu Fengmian's aura. Although Chu Fengmian had tried his best to conceal it after detecting it, the martial ghost Old Ancestor was still able to detect some of its mysteries. End of chapter. Chapter 21:19. The most important factor was Chu Fengmian's cultivation level. Even though a half-step Celestial Realm Demon Immortal was powerful, his aura was completely different from that of a Celestial Realm expert. After passing the Celestial Tribulation, a Celestial Realm Demon Immortal would have a unique aura, which was also a sign of ascending to immortality. Even though Chu Fengmian's current strength was far stronger than most Immortal Realm experts and even Immortal Warrior Realm Demon Immortals, it still couldn't make up for this. Therefore, as long as a Celestial Realm expert saw Chu Fengmian, they could clearly see that Chu Fengmian was still a half-step Celestial Realm expert. However, it didn't have much of an impact. When Martial Ghost Old Ancestor activated the array diagram to probe Chu Fengmian's background, Chu Fengmian reacted in an instant and hid his figure. Therefore, even though Martial Ghost Old Ancestor had probed Chu Fengmian's background, it was still very vague and difficult to judge Chu Fengmian's true strength. He could only be sure that Chu Fengmian wasn't as strong as they thought. Although this was a small accident for Chu Fengmian's plan, it didn't affect anything. I don't know the origin of this immortal array diagram. I feel that the aura of this immortal array diagram is very similar to that of the God Spying Mirror. Is there some connection? Chu Fengmian looked at Martial Ghost Old Ancestor from afar. The immortal array diagram attracted Chu Fengmian's attention. This kind of spiritual tool that could detect aura was extremely rare, let alone an immortal tool. The Heavenly Tao sect had once walked the furthest on this path. Heavenly Tao sect was once the most glorious sect in the 9 regions. It was the only sect that had ever chosen the 10 great ancient immortal techniques in the name of Heavenly Tao. It had created countless legends. If this immortal array diagram was related to Heavenly Tao sect, it was definitely a supreme treasure. Its value was far higher than that of an immortal tool. Martial Ghost Old Ancestor wasn't from the 9 regions and didn't know the history of the 9 regions as well as Chu Fengmian. Therefore, it was possible that he didn't know the true origin of this immortal array diagram and couldn't exert the true power of this immortal array diagram. Immortal artifacts were different from spiritual artifacts. For some immortal artifacts, if one did not know their origins, one would not be able to unleash their true power. Just like the Life Seal, only those who had cultivated the Life Emperor technique and gathered the Life Emperor force could unleash the greatest power of the Life Seal. Originally, Chu Fengmian had lured Martial Ghost Patriarch and Tianqing Jiandi over to deal with Tianqing Jiandi. His goal was Tianqing Jiandi's supreme sword qi. Once Chu Fengmian obtained the supreme sword qi, even if he did not kill them, he only needed to retreat unscathed. Chu Fengmian had such a plan from the beginning. Given Chu Fengmian's current strength, it was definitely not a good choice to fight Martial Ghost Patriarch and Tianxing Jiandi head-on. Once Chu Fengmian obtained the several hundred strands of supreme sword qi in Tianxing Jiandi's hands and refined them, his strength would advance by leaps and bounds. At that time, it would not be too late to chase after these two people. However, the moment he saw the immortal artifact array diagram in Martial Ghost Patriarch's hands, Chu Fengmian's mind suddenly changed. This immortal artifact array diagram was as important as the supreme sword qi. If this immortal artifact array diagram was truly related to the Heavenly Path sect, then it would be a priceless treasure. As the most glorious sect in the history of the 9 regions, very few of the Heavenly Path sect's ruins had appeared. It was only by chance that some spiritual artifacts and treasures of the Tiandao sect could be found in the ruins of the sect. However, the real ruins of the Tiandao sect had never appeared. Any spiritual artifact or immortal artifact related to the Tiandao sect could be related to the inheritance of the Tiandao sect. It could be said to be priceless. Therefore, today, Chu Fengmian would not only obtain the supreme sword qi, but also the immortal artifact array diagram. Martial Ghost Patriarch examined the immortal artifact array diagram several times with no result. He also stopped, knowing that Chu Fengmian had hidden himself. That kid must have some kind of spiritual artifact on him. It might even be an immortal artifact that can conceal his aura. I can't detect his location, but I can confirm that he must be hiding in the returning ruins sky. To be able to escape detection, this kid has some tricks up his sleeve. Tianxing Jiandi was slightly surprised to hear this result. He had also seen the power of the immortal artifact array diagram in Martial Ghost Patriarch's hands. Once someone got close to it, even immortal generals would not be able to escape detection. This time, Chu Fengmian had actually escaped detection. Don't worry, the returning ruins sky is only so big. If we search bit by bit, it won't take long for us to find that kid. Moreover, my spirit-seeking map has already captured a bit of his aura. As long as he dares to use his spiritual energy, I will be able to detect it immediately. Martial Ghost Patriarch said confidently. He had already confirmed that Chu Fengmian was in the returning ruins sky, so it was only a matter of time before he found him. Moreover, with the spirit-seeking map, he was not worried that Chu Fengmian would take the opportunity to escape. In his opinion, Chu Fengmian was already trapped in the returning ruins sky. If he continued to hide, he would only be caught. Come, let's search together, Martial Ghost Patriarch said, then called out to Tianxing Jiandi. The two of them searched the returning ruins sky for traces of Chu Fengmian. Both of them were immortal generals. Their spiritual senses could cover a radius of dozens of miles. Everything hidden within dozens of miles would be discovered by them. Although the returning ruins sky wasn't small, it wouldn't take them a long time to explore it. So cautious. In the ruins of chaos, Chu Fengmian frowned when he saw Martial Ghost Patriarch and Tianxing Jiandi working together to search for him. The two of them were obviously very cautious people. Even if they knew that Chu Fengmian was not as strong as he seemed, they still worked together to search for him. Chu Fengmian originally wanted to defeat them one by one. Facing one immortal general alone was much easier than facing two immortal generals at the same time. But now that Martial Ghost Patriarch and Tianxing Jiandi were so cautious, Chu Fengmian did not have the opportunity to do so. I have no choice but to make a move. Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with cold killing intent as he muttered to himself. He knew very well that waiting for the absorption would not give him any chance, so he might as well make a move now. This time, Chu Fengmian had set up a trap and was fully prepared. Even if it was 1 against 2, Chu Fengmian was still confident. Sword. Chu Fengmian's mind moved and suddenly communicated with the 1,800 Supreme Sword Qi. These 1,800 Supreme Sword Qi were now drifting in the ruins of chaos, and Chu Fengmian's spiritual power was injected into them. These 1,800 Supreme Sword Qi burst out with a tyrannical sword intent. End of chapter. Chapter 2120. This is the Supreme Sword Qi. Supreme Sword Qi is actually hidden in the returning ruins sky? In the returning ruins sky, Ancestor Wugui and Tianxing Jiendi were searching one of the continents. There were dozens of such continents in the returning ruins sky. Suddenly, the heavenly Saint Sword Emperor's figure stopped in the air. He withdrew his spiritual consciousness and used all his strength to sense something. Then, a look of ecstasy appeared on Tianxing Jiandi's face. It's the Supreme Sword Qi. It's really the Supreme Sword Qi. I've long heard that the Supreme Sword Qi is hidden in the returning ruins sky. The last time I came, I couldn't find it. I didn't expect to sense a little bit of the Supreme Sword Qi this time. Is this my fortuitous encounter? I have a total of 900 strands of Supreme Sword Qi. If I can obtain another 100 strands of Supreme Sword Qi and gather 1,000 strands, the power of the Supreme Sword Qi will increase by countless times. Even just one Supreme Sword Qi will greatly increase the power of the Supreme Sword Qi. Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor muttered to himself as he revealed an extremely excited expression. He had also obtained the Supreme Sword Qi by chance. As his strength grew, the number of Supreme Sword Qi in his hands also increased. Now, he had a total of 900 Supreme Sword Qi in his hands. Although there was still a long way to go before he could reach 3,000 Supreme Sword Qi, it was difficult for most sword cultivators to obtain 1 or 2 Supreme Sword Qi. Tianxing Jiendi had 900 of them. As Tianxing Jiandi's strength grew, he could see how powerful the Supreme Sword Qi was. It was definitely much more powerful than an immortal weapon. The Supreme Sword Qi was not just its power. The sword techniques and sword intent contained in it were the most important treasures for a sword cultivator. If Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor could obtain even more Supreme Sword Qi, he would be able to comprehend the sword arts and sword intent within it. Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor's strength would increase by another level. His strength had already reached the pinnacle of the immortal general realm. If he took another step forward, he would step into the profound heaven realm and become an immortal marquis. At that time, he would even be able to control the entire 100 Extremes Starfield Alliance and become the master of the alliance. This huge benefit made the people of Tianxing Jiendi tremble with excitement. Unparalleled Sword Qi? You really found unparalleled Sword Qi? Old Ancestor Gui Wu also came over and said in surprise when he heard Tianxing Jiendi talking to himself. Of course, he knew what kind of treasure this Supreme Sword Qi was. It was the ultimate treasure of the sword principle. Tianxing Jiendi was said to be an invincible giant in the alliance of the 100 Extremes star regions. Tianxing Jiendi was even stronger than him because of this Supreme Sword Qi. Sword cultivators who possessed Supreme Sword Qi could be said to be invincible in the same realm in terms of strength. This was especially true for Supreme Sword Qi. 3,000 of them were a single entity. If a person obtained more Supreme Sword Qi, the power they could unleash would increase exponentially. Let's go first. I'll help you collect those Supreme Sword Qi first. After that, we'll continue to search for that kid. Anyway, he's in the returning ruins sky. He can't run away. Old Ancestor Gui Wu made a prompt decision. Supreme Sword Qi was the ultimate treasure of the sword principle. Once it appeared, it would attract the attention of countless experts. Even some experts who were not sword cultivators would go to fight for it. If they obtained Supreme Sword Qi, they could sell it to some sword cultivators for a sky-high price. The first thing they did when they found out was to collect it. Let's go! Tianqing Jiandi shouted coldly. The two of them rose into the air and left the continent. Over there! Streaks of sword light emerged from the heavenly saint sword emperor's body. These streaks of sword light turned into spiritual swords and guarded the heavenly saint sword emperor. These spiritual swords were supreme sword chi. There were a total of 900 supreme sword chi. Now, all of them appeared beside Tianqing Jiandi, guiding him forward. The two of them flew for a full 10 minutes. The surrounding scenery became more and more desolate. The stars and continents had all disappeared. It was incomparably silent. This is the edge of the returning ruins sky. Is the supreme sword chi hidden here? Old ancestor Gui Wu said with a frown as he looked around. That's right. I have supreme sword chi. I can't be wrong about the aura of the supreme sword chi. I can already feel the sword will. The supreme sword chi is not far away. Tianqing Jiandi was extremely excited. He sped up. A few figures flickered and finally, the two of them stopped in front of a patch of chaos. Is this the chaotic ruins? The two of them involuntarily came to a halt when they saw Hun Dun in front of them. A grave expression appeared on their faces. Old ancestor Gui Wu looked at the chaos in front of him and said with a grim expression, "The chaotic ruins is a famous dangerous place in the returning ruins sky. It is said that the chaos contains ancient poisonous gas and miasma. Once it enters one's body, one will die without a doubt. There is no cure." Many powerhouses from the extraterritorial starry sky had ventured into the chaotic ruins. However, they either fled in panic or died in the ruins. Old ancestor Gui Wu had heard of the dangers in there. Therefore, they stopped at the edge of the chaotic ruins and did not dare to go any closer. I can feel that the supreme sword chi is inside, and there are more than one or two supreme sword chi inside. Tianqing Jiandi's gaze fell on the chaotic ruins. Even under the cover of the chaos, Tianqing Jiandi could still see the sword light. There were hundreds of them. Hundreds of supreme sword chi. Seeing this scene, Tianqing Jiandi's eyes were burning. Even the legendary dangers of the chaotic ruins could not stop him. He already had 900 strands of supreme sword chi. If he obtained another 600 strands of supreme sword chi, he would have more than 1,500 strands of supreme sword chi. By then, he would not be afraid even if he encountered other existences with supreme sword chi. Once he surpassed the number of supreme sword chi, he would be able to suppress the opponent. If he could control 1,500 supreme sword chi, he would have a great chance of collecting 3,000 supreme sword chi in the future. Thinking of this, Tianqing Jiandi's eyes became even more burning. Wealth comes from danger. Let's go in. The chaotic spiritual chi in the chaotic ruins is indeed highly toxic. However, with our strength, it should not be a problem to hold on for an hour. Let's go and collect some supreme sword chi first. If we encounter any danger, we will retreat. Tianqing Jiandi said. The supreme sword chi was right in front of him. Even if he knew that there was danger, he could not give up. End of chapter. Chapter 21-21. Tianqing Jiandi and Martial Ghost Patriarch did not hesitate and stepped into the Primal Chaos Ruins together. After entering the Primal Chaos Ruins, the two of them condensed their immortal energy and formed a layer of barrier to protect them from the miasma and poison in the Primal Chaos Ruins. They had heard of the dangers of the Primal Chaos Ruins. Now that they had entered it, they were naturally very careful. They did not want to fall into the Primal Chaos Ruins. This is... The moment Tianqing Jiandi entered the Primal Chaos Ruins, he was blinded by countless dazzling sword lights. These sword lights were connected to form a net, as if the entire Primal Chaos Ruins was filled with supreme sword chi. Just by looking at the supreme sword chi, there were hundreds of them. Furthermore, the supreme sword chi was still drifting in the Primal Chaos Ruins, revealing even more supreme sword chi. Clearly, the number of Supreme Sword Chi far exceeded this number. How can there be so many Supreme Sword Chi? The Heavenly Saint's sword was stunned. He had originally thought that there would only be around 100 strands of Supreme Sword Chi in the Primal Chaos Ruins. However, after entering the Primal Chaos Ruins, the number of strands of Supreme Sword Chi far exceeded his expectations. There are hundreds, no, thousands of Supreme Sword Chi. How can there be so many? Tianxing Jiandi's voice was filled with disbelief. As an immortal general expert, he felt that the scene before him was a blur. That was over 1,000 strands of Supreme Sword Chi. After all, the 900 strands of Supreme Sword Chi in his possession had all been obtained through many life and death battles. He had obtained them from others. But now, the number of Supreme Sword Chi in the Primal Chaos Ruins was much more than what he had. After the shock, Tianxing Jiandi's face was filled with ecstasy. The more Supreme Sword Chi he obtained, the greater the power he could unleash. If he could obtain so many Supreme Sword Chi, his strength would rise to an unimaginable level. Not only would he be able to sweep through the 100 Extremes Alliance, but he would also be able to sweep through all the major forces in the 9 domains. In the future, he might even have the chance to dominate the 9 domains and become the lord of the sacred region. His whole body was trembling with excitement. Brother Tianxing, let's collect these Supreme Sword Chis first. We can't stay here for long. Ancestor Gui Wu, who was standing at the side, appeared to be much calmer as he hastily reminded. This sentence also startled Tianxing Jiandi. All right, let's work together to collect them. As he spoke, Tianxing Jiandi took out his spiritual sword. His spiritual sword was a golden immortal artifact. As soon as it was unsheathed, a dazzling sword intent burst out from Tianxing Jiandi's body. His sword intent was faintly divine. As he spoke, the golden spirit devoured. The tip of the sword was unsheathed, and it immediately slashed towards the nearest dozens of Supreme Sword Chi. At the same time, Tianxing Jiandi's other hand also condensed immortal power and turned into an invisible giant hand. It enveloped the dozens of Supreme Sword Chi and was ready to collect it at any time. Tianxing Jiandi had 900 Supreme Sword Chi in his hand. Now, he was very familiar with how to collect the Supreme Sword Chi. The tip of the sword in his hand repeatedly weakened the power of the dozens of Supreme Sword Chi. At the same time, Ancestor Gui Wu also acted together to help Tianxing Jiandi weaken the power of the Supreme Sword Chi. It's starting. In the Primal Chaos Ruins, Chu Fengmian could clearly sense that his plan could begin when the Celestial Sacred Sword Emperor and the Martial Ghost Patriarch made their move. Luring Tianxing Jiandi and Ancestor Gui Wu to the chaotic ruins was the first step of Chu Fengmian's plan. Now that the first step was successful, it was time to move on to the second step. First, weaken the strength of the two of them. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered. Suddenly, with a thought, an invisible spiritual power was injected into all the Supreme Sword Chi, causing the power of the Supreme Sword Chi to suddenly skyrocket. On the other side, under the joint attack of the two immortal generals, Tianxing Jiandi and Ancestor Gui Wu, the dozens of Supreme Sword Chi had been forced into a desperate situation. It was simply impossible to resist. They were about to be enveloped by Tianxing Jiandi's invisible giant hand and taken into the palm of his hand. These Supreme Sword Chi seemed to be ownerless. It won't be difficult to collect them. Seeing this scene, Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor's eyes were filled with excitement. When he saw so many Supreme Sword Chis, he had some suspicions in his heart. He suspected that there was a trap. However, when he attacked, he realized that these Supreme Sword Chis were only instinctive and obviously ownerless. In this way, it would be much easier for him to deal with them. Although there were more than 1,000 Supreme Sword Chi in the returning ruined sky, and once they were gathered together, their power would be incomparably powerful. However, he only needed to break them one by one. If dozens of Supreme Sword Chi were to join forces, they would not be able to do anything. We can't let our guard down. If the other Supreme Sword Chi were to join forces, it would be troublesome. Ancestor Gui Wu observed his own body and said, "In the chaotic ruins, we can't replenish our immortal power. Moreover, we have to constantly consume our immortal power to resist the poison of the chaotic spiritual qi. We have to solve this quickly." Ancestor Gui Wu's face was very anxious. In the chaotic ruins, he had always felt that he was in danger, so he did not want to stay here any longer. "All right, then let's solve this quickly." Tianxing Jiandi nodded and did not continue the stalemate. Suddenly, the aura on his body skyrocketed. An invisible force enveloped his body, and his strength skyrocketed several times. It was obvious that he had activated a secret technique to increase his strength. Among immortal generals, there were always secret techniques that they could use. Now that time was of the essence, Tianxing Jiandi did not want to waste any more time. He immediately activated the secret technique, and his attack became several times more violent. The remaining power of the dozens of Supreme Sword Chi was almost instantly disintegrated. He no longer had any strength to resist. Seeing this, Tianxing Jiandi's palm, which had been covering the sky, suddenly fell and grabbed at the dozens of Supreme Sword Chi. "Surrender!" Tianxing Jiandi's face showed a hint of greed. However, at this moment, a dazzling sword light suddenly burst out from the depths of the chaotic ruins. Along with the appearance of the sword light was an incomparably huge sword chi. This sword chi came from the depths of the chaotic ruins and slashed out. It contained a supreme sword will that could destroy everything. It suddenly burst out from the depths of the chaotic ruins and headed straight for Tianxing Jiandi. Ancestor Gui Wu slashed out. Chapter 21-22. This is bad. All the Supreme Sword Chi in the entire chaotic ruins have combined to form a sword chi. It's going to kill us both. The moment Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor saw this incomparably huge sword chi slashing towards him, he immediately realized what this sword chi was. A hint of fear appeared on his face as he suddenly retreated. The invisible giant hand that shrouded them also dissipated. The dozens of Supreme Sword Chi flew out and merged with the huge sword chi. How can a single strand of sword chi possess such power? Just how many strands of sword chi are there? Martial Ghost Ancestor dodged the sword chi with a fearful look on his face. If this huge sword chi were to hit him, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. Although the Supreme Sword Chi was a Supreme Sword treasure, the power of these Supreme Sword Chi was enough to threaten an immortal general expert. This was far beyond his expectations. This is 1,800 Supreme Sword Chi. A total of 1,800 Supreme Sword Chi. God, how can there be so many Supreme Sword Chi here? On the other side, the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor's gaze was fixed on the huge sword chi. The huge sword chi was actually 1,800 Supreme Sword Chis that had been condensed into a single ray of devouring. The sword chi was prepared to kill with one blow. However, the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor, the martial ghost ancestor, was extremely decisive. The moment he saw the enormous sword aura slashing toward him, he immediately chose to dodge. He did not take any risks, causing the enormous sword aura to miss. However, the moment the huge sword chi approached martial ghost ancestor Tianxing Jiandi, it suddenly shattered and turned into the shape of spiritual swords. 1,800 Supreme Sword Chi dispersed and suddenly formed a sword formation. The sword formation enveloped the martial ghost ancestor and the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor. At a glance, it seemed as if every single strand of Supreme Sword aura in the sword formation was a separate existence. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that every single strand of Supreme Sword aura was connected to one another. The entire grand formation was a single entity. Unless all the supreme sword chi were broken, it was impossible to break this sword formation. This was the first sword formation, the Supreme Sword Formation. 1,800 Supreme Sword Chi was enough to condense the embryonic form of the Supreme Sword Formation and display a part of its power. Seeing the formation of the Sword Formation, Tianxing Jiandi and Martial Ghost Ancestor did not have any time to react. The moment the two of them reacted, they were already trapped in this Supreme Sword Formation. Streaks of sword radiance surrounded the two of them, ready to stab at them at any time. Supreme Sword Formation? These Supreme Sword Chi actually know how to form a Supreme Sword Formation. The moment the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor saw the sword formation clearly, his face was filled with incomparable shock. He had never imagined that the Supreme Sword Aura before him would actually know how to set up a sword formation. The Supreme Sword Formation was not the sword formation with the strongest attack, but it was the most difficult sword formation to deal with. Once trapped in the Supreme Sword Formation, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens to escape. Martial Ghost Ancestor looked at the Supreme Sword Chi with an ugly expression. He also found that the Supreme Sword Formation was flawless, and he had no chance to find a flaw to break it. Oh no, we'll be in trouble if we're trapped in the Primal Chaos Ruins. Once we run out of immortal force, we won't be able to resist the poisonous gas and miasma in the Primal Chaos Ruins, let alone the Supreme Sword Formation. Martial Ghost Ancestor said with an ugly expression. He knew very well that the Supreme Sword Array wasn't the biggest threat. The chaotic spiritual chi in the Primal Chaos Ruins, as well as the poisonous gas and miasma, was the biggest threat. He could break the Supreme Sword Formation bit by bit. Sooner or later, he would be able to break it, but his current immortal power could not last that long. In the chaotic ruins, not only did he have no way to replenish his immortal power, but he also had to constantly consume his immortal power to resist the chaotic spiritual chi. His immortal power could only last for half an hour at most. Although he could replenish his immortal power by devouring immortal stones, it was simply a drop in the bucket compared to his consumption. Don't hold back. Attack with all your might. This Supreme Sword Chi is after all an ownerless object. The power it contains will not last long. Let's blast it out. The Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor moved abruptly as all the energy in his body burst out at the same time. Countless secret techniques were unleashed at this moment. Surges of energy were added to his body as though an ancient Sword Emperor had descended. Sword after sword bombarded the Supreme Sword Formation. 10 great ghost generals. Old Ancestor Gui Wu clenched his teeth and took out his trump card. He took out a gourd. This gourd wasn't an ordinary green gourd, it was a unique gray gourd. He couldn't detect any signs of life on it. When the gourd was opened, more gray chi was emitted. This gray chi was death chi. Weaker martial artists and fey immortals would die on the spot if they came into contact with even a little of it. Even if they did not die, their lifespan would be affected. As the death chi appeared, 10 figures emerged from the gourd. These 10 figures were incomparably illusory. They were not humans, but ghosts. They were a kind of ghost clan. These 10 great ghost generals were Martial Ghost Ancestors' trump card. Each of them had the strength of a peak immortal warrior. Once the 10 great ghost generals joined forces, they could even contend against an immortal warrior expert. The 10 great ghost generals were summoned, and together with Martial Ghost Ancestor, they attacked the Supreme Sword Formation. At this moment, Tianxing Jiandi and Martial Ghost Ancestor both displayed their trump cards, bombarding the Supreme Sword Chi together. Even though the Supreme Sword Chi was supported by Chu Fengmian's power, it was still shaken by the bombardment, and the Supreme Sword Chi was sent flying. However, every time a Supreme Sword Chi was sent flying, the other Supreme Sword Chi would fly over and fill the gap. The strength of these two is really terrifying. They are much more powerful than Jihai Monarch. In the Chaos Ruins, Chu Fengmian could clearly feel the power of the Supreme Sword formation being bombarded time and time again. The strength of the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor had reached the pinnacle of the immortal general realm. Under the support of countless secret techniques, his strength was even more terrifying, far surpassing the Ocean Monarch that Chu Fengmian had fought before. As for Martial Ghost Ancestor, although his strength was on par with Jihai Monarch, his 10 great ghost generals were not inferior to Martial Ghost Ancestor. When they joined forces, they were almost equivalent to the strength of 2 immortal warriors. Chapter 21-23. Fortunately, I didn't act rashly and chose to use the Supreme Sword formation to test their strength. Otherwise, I would have been in danger if they had suddenly unleashed their full strength. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but think when he saw their strength. It was no wonder that Tianxing Jiandi and Martial Ghost Patriarch were so confident that they dared to come to the 9 regions to hunt Chu Fengmian down. They weren't afraid of any traps. Given their strength, they could even escape unscathed from a profound sky immortal marquee expert if they joined forces. With this kind of strength, the 2 of them could practically do as they pleased even in the 9 regions where experts were as numerous as the clouds. However, even though the 2 of them were strong, Chu Fengmian was fully prepared to deal with them. Although the 2 of them were strong, they were in the ruins of primal chaos. Here, the 2 of them couldn't unleash their full strength without restraint. Moreover, they had to constantly consume their strength to resist the chaotic spiritual energy in the chaotic ruins. Luring the 2 of them into the chaotic ruins was the real killer move in Chu Fengmian's plan. As for the Supreme Sword Array, Chu Fengmian did not need to use it to kill them. As long as he kept the 2 of them in the primal chaos ruins, the primal chaos spiritual energy in the primal chaos ruins would constantly deplete their strength. When the 2 of them were weakened to the lowest point, it would be time for Chu Fengmian to make his move. Chu Fengmian hid in the chaotic ruins and wasn't in a hurry to make his move. Instead, he was observing the 2 of them. Tianxing Jiandi and Martial Ghost Patriarch were unleashing their full strength, frantically bombarding the Supreme Sword formation. The 2 of them unleashed their full strength, and the crack that they had just created was getting bigger and bigger. This crack was a breakthrough point. The Supreme Sword formation was a whole entity. Now that there was such a crack, it was equivalent to the entire entity suddenly collapsing. The entire Supreme Sword formation was on the verge of collapsing because of this crack. It was on the verge of shattering at any moment. After all, these Supreme Sword Chis are ownerless and don't have much power left. Martial Ghost Patriarch, lend me a hand and I'll take all of them. Seeing that the Supreme Sword formation was about to be broken, Tianxing Jiandi's face was filled with excitement. He shouted loudly as he reached out to grab the Supreme Sword formation. Tianxing Jiandi wanted to take the entire Supreme Sword formation and all 1,800 strands of Supreme Sword Chi in one go. Originally, Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor only had 900 strands of Supreme Sword Chi. However, there were a total of 1,800 strands of Supreme Sword Chi in front of him. That was double the amount of Supreme Sword Chi in his body. If he could collect so many Supreme Sword Chi and comprehend the sword intent in them, his strength would reach an unbelievable level. Now that he had found an opportunity, the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor did not hesitate to take it. And this time, he had the help of Martial Ghost Patriarch from the side. The Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor channeled his spiritual energy and transformed it into a giant hand that grabbed at the Supreme Sword Array. Martial Ghost Ancestor also let out a long howl. The 10 ghost generals beside him suddenly spread out and stood apart. These 10 ghost generals were like 10 array cores. Suddenly, they formed a big formation. The core of this big formation was none other than Martial Ghost Patriarch. Martial Ghost Patriarch's power surged wildly. The power of the 10 ghost generals poured into his body, and he erupted with all his strength to bombard the Supreme Sword formation. Under the bombardment of countless immortal techniques, the Supreme Sword formation was already tottering and falling. Now that the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor had suddenly taken it away, the Supreme Sword formation was no longer able to resist and was about to be taken away. "These Supreme Sword Chis are all mine," Tianxing Jiendi shouted excitedly. His palm was already above the Supreme Sword formation. "Do it!" The moment Tianxing Jiendi was about to take the Supreme Sword formation, Chu Fengmian also knew that this was the time. Although there were as many as 1,800 Supreme Sword Chis, they were far from enough to fight against Martial Ghost Patriarch and Tianxing Jiendi, the 2 immortal generals. After delaying for so long, it was already enough. If Chu Fengmian didn't make a move and allowed the Heavenly Saint Sword Emperor to take away the 1,800 strands of Supreme Sword Chi, Chu Fengmian would cry without tears. The moment he spoke, Chu Fengmian, who was in the depths of the ruins of chaos, suddenly swayed and appeared in front of Tianxing Jiendi. The 1,800 Supreme Sword Chis immediately burrowed into Chu Fengmian's body the moment he appeared, avoiding Tianxing Jiendi's palm. "Who are you? How dare you snatch the Supreme Sword Chis?" Tianxing Jiendi thought that someone had come to snatch the Supreme Sword Chis when he saw the figure that had suddenly appeared. Suddenly, the sword in his hand flickered and a sword light slashed at Chu Fengmian. However, just as the sword light was about to cut Chu Fengmian, the 1,800 Supreme Sword Chis suddenly flew out of Chu Fengmian's body and turned into a Supreme Sword formation in front of Chu Fengmian to block the sword light. After Chu Fengmian injected his spiritual power, the Supreme Sword Chis immediately recovered to their strongest state and turned into Supreme Sword Chis to protect Chu Fengmian. "How can you control these Supreme Sword Chis? No, are you the master of these Supreme Sword Chis? Did you lure us here on purpose?" The Heavenly Sacred Sword was stunned when he saw this scene. He had originally thought that these Supreme Sword Chis were ownerless and that Chu Fengmian had come to snatch them away. However, now that he saw that these Supreme Sword Chis were all under Chu Fengmian's control, Tianxing Jiendi suddenly realized that there was a trap. All of a sudden, he thought of a scheme. All of this was a scheme, a scheme. The Supreme Sword Chi was actually just bait to lure them here. Tianxing Jiendi was an immortal general who had experienced countless battles of life and death. Now, he suddenly realized that all of this was not a coincidence, but a scheme. So what if it's a scheme? You're just a little half-step celestial realm brat. How dare you scheme against me? If I kill you, these Supreme Sword Chis will still be mine. Die for me. After the Heavenly Sacred Sword Emperor saw through Chu Fengmian's realm, he immediately sneered and attacked. Suddenly, more sword chis appeared. They slashed towards Chu Fengmian. The power of this sword was incomparably sacred. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.